Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 61. 61 Irrefutable Evidence, 1. He examined Su Qian discreetly and saw that his body was tense. He forced a smile and comforted him. I was only ordered to bring you back for questioning. I don't know the details. However, when you get to the Yamen, remember one thing: don't hide what you should say, and don't say what you shouldn't say. Don't I know this? It's not worth 30 taels of silver at all.sh*t. What's the difference between this and an insincere excuse like I've already asked the relevant department to deal with it? Su Qian really wanted to slap the man to death, but he didn't dare to. The carriage passed through many busy cities and long streets, and arrived at the night watchman's yamen at the beginning of midnight. Su Qian jumped off the carriage and entered the famous yamen under the escort of 2 night watchmen. Its office was converted from 2 3-entry courtyards. Attics stood tall, and night watchmen in black with gongs tied to them walked in and out. They looked grim and imposing. I wonder if I'll be sent to the prison where the night watchmen work. That's a place where they eat people without spitting out their bones. Let's wait and see. I'm a good citizen, and I didn't break the law. Su Qian took a deep breath and calmed down. After a while, he was brought into a small courtyard. There were 2 night watchmen standing at the entrance of the courtyard. After the 2 sides exchanged hands, the man with squinty eyes stopped at the entrance of the courtyard and smiled. Go in, good luck. After that, he left with his serious-looking companion. Su Qian was brought in. 2 night watchmen pushed the door open and said coldly, "Let's go in." It was an interrogation room, with all kinds of torture instruments in the corner and an empty long table in the center. The head of the interrogation team did not come. Su Qian didn't dare to sit on a chair. He stood in the room, thinking about why the night watchman was looking for him. But before he had time to think about it, he heard footsteps and someone entered the courtyard. The door was pushed open, and 2 middle-aged men with silver gongs embroidered on their chests walked in. Su Qian's muscles tensed up in an instant, and he quickly glanced at the 2 silver gongs. He was surprised to find that one of them was an old acquaintance. He had a high nose bridge, deep-set facial features, and slightly light-colored pupils. He was half Nanman. He was the silver gong that he had seen in the back hall of the government office during the silver tax case. We meet again, Li Yuchun nodded. There was no warmth in his eyes. The 2 silver gongs sat behind the table with serious expressions. They examined Su Qian with sharp eyes. Answer my questions. If you lie, you will be severely punished. The unfamiliar silver gong said in a deep voice. Yes. Su Qian's heart sank. These 2 were looking at him like he was a criminal. Li Yuchun frowned. Before you answer my question, tidy up your clothes. It's basic etiquette. Su Qian realized that his clothes were too loose and not symmetrical enough. It was caused by the sneaky taking out silver notes from the carriage. Li Yuchun's expression relaxed a little when he was done tidying up his clothes, as if a load on his mind had been lifted. Did you know that the mastermind behind the tax case was the assistant minister of the previous Zhou dynasty? Asked the unfamiliar silver gong. I heard Miss Kwei from the Directorate of Celestials mention it, Su Qian answered honestly. Then you should know that Jolie is taking revenge on you. I've thought of it. Su Qian kept the young man's warning in mind. He would not hide anything. It was undeniable that the white-robed Celestials had rushed into the Ministry of Justice to save him in full view of everyone. It would be better to admit it openly and appear glorious. Do you know that Jolie wants to kill you? I know. So, in order not to be retaliated by the Zhou family, you kidnapped the Weiwo Marquis's daughter and framed Jolie. The unfamiliar silver gong's eyes flashed with a sharp light. As expected, it was because of this matter Su Qian didn't panic at all. He even showed a certain degree of confusion and panic from being wronged. "I don't understand what you're saying, sir. On the day the daughter of the Weiwu Marquis was kidnapped, you were not on duty at the Yamen of Changli County. Where did you go?" "I went to the brothel to listen to music." "I have indeed failed my duty and often sneaked to the brothel to listen to music." Constable Wan could vouch for this, because this was how everyone slacked off. "Besides, the fast hands of my Changle County are absent from work and strolling around the brothel. What does it have to do with you night watchmen? Then how do you explain the book? In the records of the documents issued by the Yamen, it showed that you went to the inner city many times." Li Yuchun said in a low voice. "I've been wronged." Su Qian's eyes widened, and he defended himself agitatedly. "I've never been to the inner city, and I've never received a letter from the Yamen. They're trying to frame me. I've always asked someone to make a certificate to enter the inner city. My hands and feet are clean." The client was Yang Ling. What did that have to do with Su Qian? The two officers interrogated Su Qian for a while, but they could not find any clues from his words. They looked at each other in surprise. "I'm also a professional when it comes to interrogation techniques." Su Qian heaved a sigh of relief, but his heart tightened again when he saw the instruments of torture. Li Yuchun sighed. "That's right. If we didn't have the evidence in advance, we might have believed you based on the conversation just now." "You're tricking me again." He even sounded very confident. Su Qian was expressionless. As a graduate of the police academy and a professional who had worked in the police station for several years, Su Qian was confident that he could handle all kinds of interrogations. Unless the other party forced a confession, that was a different matter. Assistant Minister Zhou had already fallen. Without any evidence, he believed that the night watchman would not make things too difficult for him. The unfamiliar Yin Gong took out a small book from his pocket, opened it, glanced at Su Qian, and read from the book. 1st October, Rongxide, Su Qian returned from Yunlu Academy and bought 2 gold baiao from the treasure pavilion. On the way, he was followed by people suspected to be from the Zhou residence. That night, I scared off the assassins from the Zhou mansion. October 2nd, 19th day. Bring your women to Yunlu Academy to avoid trouble. On the 5th day of the 10th month, on the 3rd day of the lunar year, enter the inner city and enter the Imperial Academy. I'll stay the night at Yingmei Pavilion. Gift of floating incense is suspected to be written by Su Qian. On the 7th day of the 10th month, on the 5th day of the 5th lunar month, a carriage crashed into the daughter of the mighty Marquis and kidnapped her with unknown means. The unfamiliar silver gong closed the small book, looked at Su Qian with ridicule, and sneered. Su Qian's body turned cold inch by inch, like the lack of wrapped clothes in winter. He shivered slowly. The night watchman was following me. He had been following me since the day I went to the academy. The night watchman had seen all of his plans. These days it's finished. Why would the night watchman follow me? I'm just a quick hand. This doesn't make sense. Su Qian roared in her heart. He felt an abyss-like despair. Framing the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue and kidnapping the daughter of a marquis. The two crimes added together were enough for the entire family to be executed. The great Confucians of Yunlu Academy couldn't save him, the Directorate of Celestials' white robes couldn't save him, and no one could save him. My scaffold was very clean, and there was no evidence left to convict me, but the night watchman who followed me witnessed my whole plan. Man proposes, God disposes. Cold sweat the size of beans appeared on Su Qian's forehead. Under the mocking and cold gazes of the 2 silver gongs, it slowly slid down his cheeks and dripped to the ground. Wait a minute. He suddenly noticed an unreasonable detail. Since the night watchman had witnessed the whole process, why didn't he expose him? As long as he handed in the book, Jolie would be able to get away with it. And the butcher's knife that was swung at the Su family, after being late for 1.5 months, fell again. Why did he have to wait until Assistant Minister Zhou had fallen from power before inviting him over for tea? Su Qian let out a breath of turbid air, along with all kinds of negative emotions. He lowered his eyes and said, I admit to my crimes, everything was done by me. I'll leave it to you two Darren to deal with it. The stern-looking Yin Luo raised an eyebrow and exchanged a look with Li Yuchun. The two of them smiled. Very smart, very sharp. Li Yuchun smiled. I was just testing you. If you reveal any flaws during the interrogation or your mind crumbles in front of irrefutable evidence, you'll be met with real punishment. After a pause, he retracted his serious expression and his smile became more relaxed. And now, you're welcomed with an invitation from the night watchman. Thank you, Alliance Master Rong Xiaorong, you're indeed a good friend. Chapter 62 62 Qualification Test, 1. An invitation from the night watchman invite me. Su Qian was in disbelief. He remained silent and did not rush to speak. You're a talent. I've already confirmed it when we were in the back hall of the government office. However, there are rules for the night watchman, and the qi refining stage is the bottom line. Li Yuchun changed to a more casual sitting position, not as aggressive as before. As De Feng's guardian and His Majesty's protector, it's normal to have higher requirements. But you've proved yourself with your own abilities. Even if you're in the spirit refining realm, the night watchman is willing to recruit you. Is it because my methods are dirty enough and my thoughts are meticulous enough, so I made an exception and recruited him? That's right, this half-Nanman silver gong expressed her admiration for me when solving the tax and silver case. The serious-looking Yin Gong added, of course, the main reason is that the eldest princess recommended you. The eldest princess? Su Qian was shocked again. Who is the eldest princess? Why did she recommend her? I don't even know her. I've indeed heard of her in Yunlu Academy. But we've never met before, so why did she recommend me to the night watchman? Su Qian was full of confusion, but the two silver gongs didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. It was also possible that they didn't know. Other than that, the reason why the two of you didn't report me is. You should know the duty of a night watchman, Li Yuchun said with a smile. The 100 Inspector's Assistant Minister Zhou, who had been greedy for the money and grain of the national treasury, was not on the same side as the night watchman. In fact, the night watchman's organization had even added fuel to the fire of Assistant Minister Zhou's fall. Su Qian suddenly understood. Assistant Minister Zhou will be finished sooner or later. We have already begun to deal with him, but your little scheme has helped us speed up our progress. The serious-looking Yin Luo said. Li Yuchun glanced at him. Lord Sun, as we've agreed, I'll accept this person. Please give us some space to talk. Sun Yinzhong did not leave. He stared at Su Qian and said, you have the right to choose. Follow him or follow me. There isn't much difference in power between the two of us, but he's a stubborn and inflexible man. He's living an ordinary life with his gong, but with my gong, he can buy a decent small courtyard in the inner city in 3 years at most. Working for 3 years and getting a house in the capital, it was really an irresistible temptation. Su Qian rejected Sun Yinluo's offer and said. At the time of the tax and silver case, Lord Li gave me the opportunity to redeem myself. I have always remembered this kindness, and I want to work under him. This was only one of the reasons. The other reason was that he didn't want to go against his heart and do too many shady things. Sun Yinluo nodded slightly and praised, it's a good thing to know how to repay a debt of gratitude. He left without any hesitation. After the door was closed, Li Yuchun pointed at the chair opposite her and smiled gently. Have a seat. Let me introduce myself. I'm Li Yuchun, and I'll be your boss in the future. You can call me that. If you're not used to it, you can also call me Lord Li. Can I call you Brother Spring? Su Qian took a seat and called out Lord Li in a slightly reserved manner. When you work under me, you must have a clear conscience. You must remember this. After Li Yuchun warned him, she began to introduce the night watchman's organization. Among the night watchmen, the lowest level are white laborers. They don't have an organization and do odd jobs. The second was the copper gong, a proper night watchman, at least in the chi refining stage, with a monthly salary of 5 taels of silver and 2 stones of rice. Above them were silver gongs, enjoying the treatment of 100 households. Above the silver gong is the golden gong, which is the highest position. There are only 10 jing gongs in the capital of Great Feng, and they are directly under the command of Duke of Wei. Su Qian nodded. He knew that Wei Yuan was the head of the night watchman's organization. The duty of the night watchman is to monitor the officials and protect the capital. You can slowly familiarize yourself with the specific business in the future. Li Yuchun looked at Su Qian. You're at the peak of the spirit refinement realm. I have 2 suggestions. Point 1, slowly accumulate merit points and wait for an opportunity. 2, pay me 400 taels of silver and I'll help you open the heavenly gate. I choose the second option, Su Qian said without hesitation. You're pretty rich, aren't you? Li Yuchun narrowed his eyes. The Directorate of Celestials Miss Cai Wei lent it to me. Su Qian threw the blame on the big-eyed beauty without blushing or having a heartbeat. Li Yuchun nodded. I'll arrange for you to change your household registration and go through the relevant procedures. After he finished speaking, he went out. After a while, he led the squinty-eyed young man and the serious young man in. Song Ting Feng, the man with squinted eyes when he smiled, introduced himself and sized Su Qian up and down. You're not bad. You've come in and become colleagues. Zhu Guangxiao. After the unsmiling young man finished speaking, he did not say anything else. Su Qian followed the 2 of them to go through the employment procedures. On the way, Song Ting Feng casually chatted with them. It's generally easier to work with Chief Li, and there aren't so many schemes and infighting. The bad thing is that you have to be careful when you're fishing for money. It doesn't matter if you're a little greedy, but don't go overboard. Then can you return the 30 taels of silver to me? Su Qian looked at him sincerely. Song Ting Feng replied with an even more sincere look, when have I ever accepted your money? Bitch. Oh, I remembered wrong, Su Qian grinned. By the way, we're going to the school workshop tonight. Do you want to go together? Song Ting Feng sent an invitation. I hate this kind of rotten official communication the most. All right, Su Qian smiled. After the formalities were completed, Song Ting Feng brought him to the depths of the yamen and explained as they walked, there's another process after you've joined the update, testing your qualifications. Test my aptitude. Su Qian imagined the scene of his hand pressing on the crystal to test his battle energy rank. It's the rules and procedures set by Lord Wei. They are wisdom, strength, and heart, Song Ting Feng said. As they spoke, they came to a loft, crossed the high threshold, and entered the hall on the first floor. 2 lines of poetry were hung on the load-bearing pillar. I'm willing to worship Sha Chen with my heart. He didn't seek benefits for himself. This was written by Lord Wei to warn us. Song Ting Feng said. Obviously, it's useless. Su Qian glanced at him, his words implying something. Song Ting Feng pretended not to understand and led him inside. You're in the spirit refinement realm now, so there's no need to test your combat strength. Let's test your intelligence first. He called for the clerk in the attic and gave the order. A moment later, 2 officials came in, each holding a brocade box. One of the boxes in their hands is empty, and the other has something inside, Song Ting Feng said with a smile. You can choose one of them to ask, but you can only ask one question. And among them, one only tells lies, and the other only tells the truth. He, Song Ting Feng chuckled. You have the time for an incense stick to burn to think about it. I can't give you any hints. Zhu Guangxiao reminded him, this is a difficult question. Think about it carefully. Song Ting Feng nodded, although Lord Wei said that it's just a small game, Not many people can guess it right. Although I understood it after the incident, it was already the time it takes an incense stick to burn. It's said that only Lord Jin Luo can understand this question in 20 breaths. The clerk lit an incense and placed it on the side. I've tried to solve this kind of simple logic problem countless times in my previous life. Su Qian turned to the clerk on his left and asked, "If you were him, what would you tell me?" The clerk was a little dumbfounded. He didn't seem to expect Su Qian to ask such a question. After thinking for a while, he said in a muffled voice, "There's nothing." Su Qian nodded and pressed on the brocade box in the hands of the bailiff on the right. "The item is in this brocade box." Song Tingfeng opened his mouth and looked at his expressionless friend with a stiff face. "How long?" Zhu Guangxiao's tone was a little depressed. "Not counting the time it took for the clerk to be in a daze." 12 breaths. There was a second of silence. Song Tingfeng cupped his hands and shook his head helplessly. "You can solve the silver tax case, it's not a blind cat that got lucky." He knew about Su Qian. Li Yuchun was one of the main judges in the tax silver case. At that time, Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao were out there, trying their best to track down the non-existent demon. After the tax silver case was solved, as a participant in the case, he naturally knew of Su Qian's existence. Chapter 63. 63 Su Qian, I still have a chance. 1. Wengzhen is locked upstairs. You can go up from here all the way to the top floor. Song Tingfeng led him to the stairs and pointed upstairs. There are no requirements for this test, but you have to remember to follow your heart. If you are too pretentious, your score will be lowered. What's the use of scoring? Su Qian asked. Why did you test his aptitude? 4 grades, A, B, C, D, the better the aptitude. Naturally, it's easier to cultivate. I'm B, Song Tingfeng raised his chin. I'm C, Zhu Guangxiao said in a muffled voice. I'm a strong man. Su Qian quietly played a joke and went upstairs alone. When he reached the second floor, he saw an ancient bronze mirror hanging on the red-painted pillar facing the stairs. His figure was reflected in the mirror. Su Qian's heart skipped a beat for no reason. The muscles all over her body tensed up uncontrollably, then slowly relaxed. The distracting thoughts in his heart settled down, his state of mind was calm, and he let go of all the fame, fortune, and selfish desires. There was something wrong with this mirror. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, it settled in her heart and she didn't care. Forcefully entering sage time, this thought also settled down. He turned around the corner with light steps and came to the hall on the second floor. There was a Buddha statue worshipped here. It had a blessed body and a solemn appearance. Offerings were placed on the incense bank, and the incense was burning. An official stood in front of the Buddha statue and looked at him. Su Qian looked at the Buddha statue calmly for a while, then turned away and walked toward the stairs on the third floor. The clerk watched his back as he left, then lowered his head and wrote on the paper, as if he was evaluating him. On the third floor was a Taoist reverend, dressed in a Taoist robe, holding a wooden sword, and stepping on auspicious clouds. There was also an official in front of Fa Xiang, quietly watching Su Qian's arrival. After Su Qian turned around and left, the clerk also picked up a pen and wrote his evaluation on the paper spread out on the table. The person on the fourth floor was the scholarly sage. He wore a scholarly robe and a scholarly crown and looked into the distance. There was still an official standing in front of the saint's clay sculpture, looking at Su Qian quietly. This saint's sculpture was exactly the same as the one in Yunlu Academy. Su Qian sighed in his heart and left without any reluctance. He arrived at the highest floor, the fifth floor. The one worshipping on the fifth floor was a man in a yellow robe. He stood tall and upright, holding a sword in both hands. His eyebrows were sharp and his eyes were bright. He had an awe-inspiring aura. Su Qian didn't recognize this person, but his bright yellow dragon robe explained everything. a monarch of the Dafeng dynasty, or the founding emperor. At this point, he suddenly understood the true meaning of the heart-questioning gate. Testing one's talent was only one part of it. The true meaning was to test one's moral quality. The function of the mirror was to make people unable to do anything against their will and deliberately offer incense and worship. Oh no, I didn't worship Buddha, Taoist reverend, or saint. This means that I'm a person who doesn't respect gods, Buddha, or the 4 books and 5 scriptures. It doesn't matter, but I must worship the one on the 5th floor. I'll be finished if I don't. A person who had no king, no father, and no regard for the gods and Buddhas was not allowed to live in this era. What kind of organization was the Night Watchman? It was a spy and guard agency under the emperor. It could be disrespectful to the 3 religions, but it could not be disloyal to the emperor. Therefore, the heart-questioning gate was a selection of moral qualities. Su Qian was undoubtedly unqualified. He went up to the 5th floor in one go, but no one bowed to him. I'm just a piece of trash in the human world, I'll be kicked out of the yamen. Forget it. The key is that the Night Watchman knows that I framed Jolie. Who knows if he will bring up old scores? These thoughts flashed past one by one, settled down, and automatically ignored. Su Qian anxiously resisted the sage mode and forced himself to bow to the king. The 2 consciousnesses were fighting wildly. His body was stiff and his muscles were twitching. The officer standing in front of the king observed Su Qian for a moment, then passed him and went downstairs. A few minutes later, the clerk returned. Su Qian was still standing in the same place, his whole body stiff and trembling, as if his hands and feet were cramping. The clerk looked at Su Qian as if he was looking at a rare animal and said in a low voice, "I've already exchanged comments with my colleagues downstairs." When the Lord of Wei set up the questioning heart pass, he made it clear that if someone didn't kowtow 5 times in a row, he would be an unpardonable criminal. The clerk continued. "Brother, give me one more chance." Su Qian was extremely anxious. Therefore, Lord Wei gave us another opportunity and set up a 6th level. However, no one has ever been to that level. The clerk looked at Su Qian curiously. "You're a scorpion. You're the only one. Relax your body and don't cramp up," he said. Su Qian no longer resisted the sage mode in his heart. He adjusted his breathing and successfully stopped his muscles from twitching. Only then did he realize that his back was already drenched. He followed the clerk around the king's statue and went deeper into the area. The sunlight shone through the hollow windows, illuminating the wooden table in the room. A line of poetry was carved on the wooden stage. After killing millions of enemy soldiers, the sword at his waist was still bloody. When he returned with the golden mace, none of the officials dared to say anything. Shikachan's writing was quite domineering. "What does it mean to show me the poem?" Su Qian turned his head and looked at the silent clerk. He had wanted to stuff some silver notes into his mouth to get some information. On second thought, how could a mere official understand the intentions of that eunuch with monstrous power? That's impossible. Don't lead yourself astray, or you'll die. A poetry battle? Impossible. The theme was clearly not a competition of poetry. The heart-questioning gate was related to one's moral character, so he had to start from this aspect. Since it was a test of moral character, why did Wei Yuan put this poem here? Su Qian cleared his mind of all distracting thoughts and actively racked his brain. The 6th stage was arranged for materialists like me who have no master and no respect for gods or Buddha. It's equivalent to my last chance. Naturally, they wanted to dig out some valuable moral values from me. If I don't, then I'm dead. Precious moral character. Suddenly, Su Qian thought of the couplet in the hall on the 1st floor. She was willing to serve the world with her heart and not seek benefits for herself. And the duty of the night watchman was to supervise the officials. Wei Yuan's poem also expressed his loyalty to the country and his intention to suppress the officials. Thinking of this, he suddenly understood the meaning of the eunuch. This poem was placed here not for a competition of poems, but for empathy. If that unpardonable man with no army or teacher really had a bad nature, he wouldn't be able to go against his own heart and force himself to write a poem. On the other hand, it meant that he still had valuable moral character, and Wei Yuan was willing to give him a chance. Su Qian sighed and reached out his hand. Pen and ink. The clerk handed over a writing brush and laid out the rice paper on the wooden table. Su Qian's brush was suspended on the paper, and he closed his eyes. Although I have no king in my heart, I don't care to worship God or Buddha. I'm a true materialist. But I'm not an unpardonable villain. I have justice in my heart and principles under my feet. I've never preyed on the people, and I've never used my identity as a lowly official to extort or blackmail them, even if this is the norm in society. Even though I once desperately wanted to earn money. If you want to empathize, I'll compose a poem, as you wish. Su Qian put down the brush. Without any psychological barrier, he wrote in ugly handwriting. The people's wealth. The lower class was easy to bully, but the heavens were hard to bully. The clerk looked at the 4 sentences on the paper in a daze. He kept the paper and stared at Su Qian seriously for a while. He said, "The questioning hard pass has ended. Please do as you wish. However, do not leave the yamen before the results are out. The aptitude of every night watchman needs to be personally judged by Lord Wei. I will send it to Lord Wei now." He left the floor almost as if he was running. The sound of footsteps came from the stairs and quickly disappeared. Su Qian felt as if she was about to collapse. She panted for a moment while holding the wooden platform and followed him downstairs. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao were waiting for his colleague on the first floor. When they saw Su Qian coming down, they smiled and waved. "How many times did you kneel?" He looked like a fox when he smiled. The clerk who went downstairs did not tell him the process or the result. Su Qian opened his mouth but chose to remain silent. Zhu Guangxiao's brows furrowed slightly on his unsmiling face. "You don't look too good." "It's not just bad, I feel like I've been on the edge of life and death twice. It's more exciting than a roller coaster." Su Qian shook his head tiredly and said. "I want to find a place to sit down, drink tea, and rest." Song Tingfeng raised his eyebrows with a smile. "I'll get you another prostitute to massage your shoulders and legs. You're like a comedian under a bridge. Go to the Imperial Academy and invite the floating fragrance courtesan." Su Qian nodded with a smile. "I had the same dream when I was young." Song Tingfeng laughed out loud. Chapter 64. 64 Various Major Cultivation Systems. 1. The tallest building in the watchman's yamen was the Grand Qi building in the courtyard. The roof was sharp, and the cornice was cornice. There was a corridor 4 floors below, and the corridor on the 5th and 6th floors could be used as a lookout hall, overlooking the entire night watchman yamen. The great eunuch, who was called Wei King II by the Jianghu people, lived in this building. In the tea room on the 7th floor, a man in green was half leaning on a soft couch, holding a book in his hand. The sky blue shirt was embroidered with complicated cloud patterns, and the workmanship was fine and exquisite. His black hair was tied up with a jade hairpin, and his sideburns were white. His face was white and clean without any beard, and his eyes were deep, containing the vicissitudes of life washed by time. Wei Yuan was a man with both temperament and appearance. He was refined, handsome, and reserved. There were 2 other people in the tea house. The one who accompanied Wei Yuan to drink tea and read a book was a serious man. His facial features were as stiff as a sculpture, and he didn't seem to have any emotions. The other person had a feminine temperament and a handsome face. He had phoenix eyes, willow leaf eyebrows, and thin and red lips. At first glance, one would suspect that he was a woman in disguise. The man with the feminine temperament stood in the watchtower, bathing in the warm sunlight. He placed one hand on the hilt of the saber hanging from his waist and said, "The sun is shining brightly and there are no clouds in the sky. Isn't it more interesting to look at the scenery here than to hide in the room and read a book?" Wei Yuan put down the book in his hand and smiled, the books I can read are getting fewer and fewer. I recently heard that the Directorate of Celestials had a new blue leather book that recorded the nature of all living things in the world. I'm very curious. Yang Yan, in another 10 days, it will be the day of His Majesty's ancestral worship. Pass down the order to increase the patrols in the inner city and reduce the trade in the inner city. The man with the stiff face hummed in agreement. The man with the feminine temperament let out a breath. Foster father, you really don't intend to fight for the position of Vice Minister of Revenue and plant your own people? This is a necessary concession. Wei King I said as he looked at the door of the tea room. A blue-robed official entered with his head lowered. Lord Wei, this is Tong Gong's test results and household registration. Please make your judgment. The clerk handed over a stack of documents. Wei Yuan opened the household register and took a look. The new copper gong was called Su Qian, originally from the Chang'an County Kui class. His father and uncle were both from the military. This information was both important and unimportant. The important thing was that the night watchman's identity was special, and he had to have at least 3 generations of ancestors. Su Qian was born and raised in the capital of Dafeng. Therefore, Su Qian's identity was qualified. By not important, he meant that every night watchman had a similar innocent identity. Under the registration was the result of the intelligence test. Wei Yuan glanced at it and smiled. Qinro, how many breaths did you take to answer the questions? The man with a feminine temperament and a beautiful face raised his chin slightly. 15 breaths. Yang Yan took 19 breaths. This new copper gong's time is 12 breaths. 12 breaths. The man with the feminine temperament raised his eyebrows and proudly commented, not bad. The man with the stiff face was expressionless as he said, to be able to solve the tax and silver case in such a short time, this intelligence is not surprising. Wei Yuan laughed and stared at the following remarks. He added, the clerk holding the box was stunned for about 5 breaths. That's impossible. The man with the feminine temperament suddenly turned around and walked into the tea room. Yang Yan frowned. In other words, he only had 7 breaths of time to think. What a sharp mind. Foster father, give this person to me. Yang Yan stood up and cupped his fists. He's under your name. He's with Silver Gong Li Yuchun. Wei Yuan put down his teacup and looked at the feminine man. You've seen him before. He was at the Directorate of Celestials that day. Imperial astronomer. The man with the feminine temperament pondered for a few seconds and smiled awkwardly. Him, the brat who talks big. Yang Yan nodded in satisfaction when he heard that the newly promoted Tong Gong was working for Li Yuchun. Each golden gong was in charge of 7 silver gongs, and Li Yuchun was under his command. Foster father, how's your combat strength? Yang Yan asked. There's no need to test the peak of essence refinement. Wei Yuan laughed. The eldest princess recommended him. He's a quick-wit and capable man. That's why he's a night watchman. The eldest princess. Yang Yan and the feminine man looked at each other. Wei Yuan didn't tell them this. Wei Yuan continued to browse through the results of the heart-questioning gate. Gradually, his gentle expression turned serious and his deep eyes became sharp. Yang Yan straightened his back and looked at the paper. The man with the feminine temperament walked to Wei King I's side casually, and when he looked over, he immediately laughed. It's actually a brat who's even more arrogant than me. Foster father, how should we deal with him? There was a gloating smile on his face. Wei Yuan took out the paper at the bottom. Ugly words were written on it. You eat and you earn, the people's wealth. Wei King I's pupils suddenly froze. He stared at the 2 sentences and did not speak for a long time. It's easy to bully the people, but hard to bully the heavens. Yang Yan repeated this. The feminine man's eyes flickered slightly and he recovered from the brief shock. His attention was the opposite of the expressionless Yang Yan. You eat and you live, the people's wealth so this little fast hand thinks that he's eating the cream of the common people and not the cream of the emperor's family. What do you think, foster father? Yang Yan asked after thinking for a while. What do you think? Wei Yuan asked. I'll take on the Lord's worries and live off his riches, Yang Yan said after some deliberation. The underlying meaning was that he didn't agree with that sentence. One day, when that little copper gong rises to a golden gong, you can debate with him yourself, Wei Yuan nodded. Foster father, do you think that kid will become a golden gong in the future? The feminine-looking man raised his eyebrows. As long as he's a warrior, there won't be a problem. The three religions have their own rules, Wei Yuan said with a warm smile. Warlocks are burdened by the fate of the human world, and so are witchcraft. In this world, only warriors are the purest. Although I hate martial artists breaking the rules with their strength, I have to admit that the more arrogant a martial artist is, the more courageous he can advance. Only when there is no respect and fear in one's heart would one dare to reverse the universe. Wei Yuan took out a new inkstone from under the table, poured cinnabar and water into it, and ground it into red ink. He then dipped the brush in it. He wrote A on his household register. Unruly men are warriors, and heroes are heroes with the world in their hearts. A great hero is for the country and the people. A+. Since the night watchman was established, the number of people who had received such an evaluation could be counted on one hand. In a secret room. Take off your clothes and sit inside, Li Yuchun said, pointing at the wooden bucket. He was finally going to reach the qi refining stage. Su Qian suppressed the excitement in her heart and glanced at the pungent bath bucket, which was filled with dark green liquid. This thing was called marrow washing liquid, and just one bucket of it cost about 150 taels of silver. She quickly took off her clothes, pants, and shoes, and sat naked in the bathtub. You didn't lose your virginity, did you? Li Yuchun asked. Su Qian nodded and said, my second uncle is the Behu of the Royal Saber Guard. He told me about it. You can't lose your virginity before the qi refining stage. He leaned comfortably in the tub and asked, Boss, you're in the spirit forging stage. Li Yuchun hummed in acknowledgement. Then, after the spirit forging stage, it's copper skin and iron bones, right? Li Yuchun hummed in agreement again. Su Qian laughed. That's not a nice name. Why not call it Vajra Realm? Copper skin and iron bones are too low class, and it will make us martial artists look uncultured. The third grade of Buddhism is called Vajra. Li Yuchun explained. So that was how it was. Su Qian nodded and asked, Boss, which cultivation system is the strongest in the world? The Taoist faction said that they're the strongest, Li Yuchun answered without hesitation. What about the other systems? The other systems all think that they are the strongest. Oh, I understand. However, all the systems in the world have a common understanding, and that is, martial artists are the most unrefined and the most unpresentable. I know a little about this, because martial artists only have strange strength, but no divinity. It still wasn't fancy enough. This is just the surface. There are bigger secrets inside that involve the upper limit of the cultivation system. Su Qian straightened his back and probed, Boss, can you tell me? Chapter 65. 65. Peerless Genius. Li Yuchun sat on the chair beside the bathtub and nodded. You can go to the library pavilion to read this knowledge when you have time. However, since I'm going to stay here and watch you, I'll tell you. In your understanding, is rank 1 the limit of the system? Su Qian nodded. The grades of the various cultivation systems were originally vague, and there was no clear standard. In the later years of the sage's life, he divided the world's cultivation system into 9 levels, and he had continued to use them until now. However, the sage didn't put himself into the grade. Why is that? Su Qian asked. Let me finish first, Li Yuchun continued. Other than the sage, there are 4 other rankers. They are the Gu God, the Witch God, the Dao Master, and the Buddha. They are known to be indestructible and immortal. This time, Su Qian understood, gods and Buddhas are not in the grade no, are there really immortals in this world? I'm not sure, Li Yuchun shook his head. Su Qian thought for a while and made a guess. I've heard that the sage only lives to 82 years. According to what you said, he should be immortal. So, there's an element of exaggeration in it. Li Yuchun could not answer this question because there was no answer. Since ancient times, the legends of immortals had been passed down, and immortality was the lifelong wish of every king. But who would dare to say that they had seen an immortal? Other systems have existences that surpass ranks, but martial artists don't. A first-grade martial artist is the most powerful in the world. Li Yuchun brought the topic back. That was why everyone thought that martial artists were a vulgar system. Su Qian suddenly noticed a problem. That's not right, the Directorate of Celestials doesn't have any warlocks either. Yes. Li Yuchun nodded. But it's undeniable that warlocks make the greatest contributions among all systems. Su Qian knew about this. A level 9 warlock was a doctor who could save the dying and heal the injured. A rank 7 warlock was a feng shui master who was good at surveying the terrain and choosing cemeteries for the people and nobles. He had made an outstanding contribution by decorating his house. A 6th grade warlock alchemist had greatly promoted social development and satisfied the material needs of the common people. They had made a huge contribution to the industry and craftsmanship of this era. Student Song Qing was one of the outstanding ones. He worked hard for the human-beast career. Su Qian felt that he had transmigrated too early. After a few more decades, he might be able to write a book called An Evaluation Guide to the Customs of Another World X. In addition, Su Qian also knew that the astrologers were in charge of updating and making the Chinese calendar. To an agricultural civilization, the almanac was too important. It was directly related to the harvest of the fields. Compared to other systems, warlocks were simply role models for the country and its people, contributing to the progress of civilization. Boss, I'm suddenly starting to hurt. Su Qian frowned. The potion seeped into his pores like fine needles, causing his entire body to ache. It's good that it hurts, it's a cleansing of the tendons and marrow. In another jaw sticks time, Li Yuchun said, you'll feel like you're being cut into 1,000 pieces. That's when I'll open the divine gate for you. You can talk to distract me. Su Qian nodded. So, our emperor has been cultivating for more than 20 years. Is it for the sake of immortality? The fact that the emperor had made a beautiful Taoist nun the state teacher and had devoted herself to the Dao for more than 20 years was known throughout the country. There were even scholars who wrote about the romantic history of the emperor and the stunning Taoist nun. The result was, of course, being punished by the river crab divine beast. However, although there are no martial artists that surpass their ranks, they should be able to extend their lifespan, right? Just focus on cultivating martial arts, why pursue the illusory immortality? Li Yuchun asked, how long did you take to refine your essence? 17 years. Su Qian said that he had been stuck at the peak of essence refinement for 2 years. It's a bit slow. The disciples of the aristocratic families with sufficient resources can reach the peak of essence refinement at the age of 16. Considering the problem of physical development, 15 is the limit. Li Yuchun said. However, even the children of those aristocratic families may not be able to successfully enter the qi refining stage, because in addition to the perseverance of the body and soul, there is also the beauty in front of them. The more you eat, the easier it is for you to be caught in beauty. And the spirit refining realm is only the beginning of the martial arts system. You can imagine how difficult it is to reach the higher realm and extend one's life. I understand that Lady Floating Fragrance will definitely call me a beast sooner or later. Tonight, I'll let her know what it means, a whip technique. Su Qian felt the same. The original owner was a martial arts fanatic with a stubborn personality. She liked to waste her time on a dead end. It was this kind of personality that allowed her to polish her body day after day and lay a solid foundation for the path of martial arts. Even so, the original owner had to fight fiercely with her hands every day, not giving the left and right hands the chance to show off. If it was Su Qian himself, he could not guarantee that he could persist for so many years, let alone that he could stick to his heart in front of beauty. After all, although men usually used their brains to think, sometimes it wasn't necessarily the brain that controlled the body. Gradually, Su Qian's interest in talking grew weaker and weaker, even if he was only talking about cultivation knowledge that he was interested in. His brows furrowed deeper and deeper. The pain was beyond the limit of his endurance. It's almost done. The medicinal bath's purpose is to stimulate your body and awaken your dormant qi. Li Yuchun stood up and pressed a hand on Su Qian's head. He said in a deep voice, "Opening the heaven's gate is a very difficult thing. For those with good aptitude, I only need to circulate qi in your body 3 times, and you will be able to find the sense of qi and connect with the inside and outside. What about those with poor aptitudes?" Su Qian asked worriedly. "The worse one's aptitude is, the more times one can circulate their qi. The limit of a normal person is 9 qi circulations. In other words, if you can't sense qi on the 8th cycle, then you're not suitable for the path of a warrior. I'm looking forward to seeing your potential," Li Yuchun said, staring at him. With that, he closed his eyes and stopped talking. Immediately after, Su Qian felt a warm current flowing into his head through the Beihui point, sinking into his dantian, and flowing through his limbs and bones. His body seemed to have remembered the circulation route immediately. After completing a full circulation, he automatically activated his qi movement, got rid of his companion, and flew off on his own. Li Yuchun opened his eyes and looked at his younger brother in the bathtub with a slightly confused look. Su Qian looked back at him blankly. "It seems quite simple." Li Yuchun was speechless. "Try circulating it a few times. I'll see how it goes." Li Yuchun could only say that. Su Qian opened his eyes after completing 3 cycles. He didn't have a mirror, so he couldn't see the subtle changes brought by entering the qi refining stage. First of all, his eyes were brighter and more energetic, like stars. The change in his eyes alone was enough to make him even more charming. Secondly, his temperament had become more dignified, reserved, and deep. The last was the skin. The medicine soaked the skin and stimulated the pores, eliminating the impurities hidden in the pores, such as blackheads. Her red skin gave off a delicate feeling. Su Qian felt the new strength in his body running around. He stretched his limbs, raised his hand, and hit the window. The lattice window cracked open with a bang. The ability to release one's qi was a divine ability of the early qi refining stage. If he had been holding a sword just now, Su Qian would have been able to activate saber qi or sword qi. Of course, it would not be very powerful. After all, he had just entered the qi refining realm. Second uncle, who was at the peak of the qi refining realm, could break a wall with one strike. It could also control objects from a distance. Very good. Li Yuchun was expressionless as she nodded slightly. Continue to circulate your qi. Transporting qi is a powerful cultivation technique. At the same time, you can't relax on the polishing of your body. After saying that, he left the secret room. The moment he stepped out of the room, Brother Spring's mind was filled with the thought that it was impossible. Li Yuchun turned to look at the broken window and the corners of his mouth twitched. A peerless genius. I've encountered it so easily, haven't I? By the way, his aptitude test has ended. I'll go ask Duke Wei what grade he's given. If it was B, based on his talent of self-seeking qi sense after 1 qi circulation, he could already be added to B. This way, the corresponding resources would increase. If he's above B, he might be promoted to a grade. And a grade is the aptitude of a golden gong. He will become the key training target of the night watchman. Yes, he hasn't experienced the combat strength test. It's impossible for him to be B+. I'm overthinking it. He walked out of the courtyard and headed straight for the courtyard of the yamen where the watchman was. It was the towering Noble Spirit building. After being informed by the building staff, Li Yuchun arrived at the 7th floor and saw his direct superior and his superior's superior. Yang Yan nodded slightly at him. The effeminate man, on the other hand, turned his head to look at the scenery outside the building with little interest. Lord Wei. He bowed at a 90-degree angle, his attitude humble. We were just talking about you. I'm lucky to have a talent. Wei Yuan smiled warmly. He was lucky to have a talent. He should be referring to Su Qian. Why did the Duke of Wei praise him so much? But I haven't told him about the one cycle. Li Yuchun was confused, but he replied respectfully. I would like to know Su Qian's rating, and I have a small matter to report to you. Chapter 66 66 Emergency Mission 1. Since you've taken him under your wing, you should know his rating, but don't think too much about it, Wei Yuan said gently, and don't mind it too much. Just be normal. Of course, don't go around announcing it. The first part was fine, but the second part confused Li Yuchun. What did Lord Wei mean? Keep calm and don't mind too much. Is he saying that Su Qian's rating is too low, and he doesn't want me to feel annoyed or disdainful of him? But why did you tell me not to publicize it? With Lord Wei's identity, he shouldn't be so protective of a small gong. Li Yuchun furrowed his brows slightly. He could not figure out what the chief eunuch meant. At this moment, Wei Yuan flipped open the household register and pushed it to the edge of the table. See for yourself. Li Yuchun's gaze then fell on the household register and saw two words written in bright red: A+. Brother Spring almost lost his ability to control his expression. He said in horror, Duke of Wei. How could it be an A+? I've been working in the Night Watchman's organization for more than 10 years, and I've never seen anyone with an A rating. Even Jing Gong's aptitude was only A. What was the concept of armor? No wonder they wanted to seal my mouth. If this matter were to be spread out, it would kill Su Qian. Which night watchman would be convinced? At the same time, Li Yuchun noticed something amiss. There were 3 stages to the aptitude test, namely intelligence, strength, and heart. Su Qian was in the essence refining realm, so he was not qualified to take the combat strength test. In other words, he obtained an A+ aptitude evaluation with only 2 tests. In that case, if he were to add his talent in qi cultivation, would the evaluation increase? He must have broken through the rating system set by Lord Wei. Then would Guild Wei give a new rating, or would it remain the same? At the thought of this, Li Yuchun's heart began to burn with passion. Remember to keep your mouth shut, Wei Yuan said casually. If you have anything to say, just report it to me. Li Yuchun let out a breath and said, I've already opened the gate of heaven for Su Qian. According to the rules, I took 400 taels from him. Return it, Wei Yuan said. Talents with A-grade aptitudes had resources to begin with, and if there was a fee for opening the heaven's gate, then what was the point of the rating? Li Yuchun nodded. Wei Yuan looked at him and laughed, not bad. A few days to find qi. The effeminate man and Yang Yan, who had self-induced qi sensations after 3 qi circulations, were more interested in this and stared at Li Yuchun. One cycle. As Li Yuchun spoke, he studied the expressions of the 3 higher UPS. The expressions of the 3 people were different. Yang Yan's stoic face, which had never changed, showed a rare expression of shock. The effeminate man walked into the tea room from the watchtower. He sized up Li Yuchun with his cold eyes and sneered. That's impossible. He had the most intense reaction. Wei Yuan, who had always been gentle and refined, was in a daze. Li Yuchun lowered his head in silence. He was extremely satisfied with the 3's reactions. Go down. Wei Yuan watched as Li Yuchun left. He then turned to his two foster sons. What do you think? Do you need any special treatment? Yang Yan pondered. Wei Yuan shook his head. There's no need to spoil things. Let's just wait and see. Then, he looked at the effeminate man and said with a smile, the age difference between you and him is not that big. He can't be compared to you now, but I can't be sure about the future. It's good, and it gives you some motivation. The handsome man with a feminine temperament nodded. Li Yuchun came out of the Noble Spirit building and ran into a few silver gongs along the way. Lord Li, what made you laugh like this? Li Yuchun touched his face subconsciously and realized that the corners of his mouth had almost cracked all the way to his ears. It's small matter, a small matter. Li Yuchun waved his hand and laughed as he walked. Su Qian asked someone to bring a message back home while he stayed in the yamen, repeatedly breathing and moving his qi. He was clearly aware of the benefits that the circulation of qi brought to his body. It made his cells more active and made his spirit more exuberant. His physical body and strength were both skyrocketing in a delightful state. This state lasted until dusk. It meant that the benefits of him entering the qi refining stage had ended. With my current condition, I feel like can fight 10 of the old me. So. Second uncle wasn't serious at all when we were sparring. He even pretended to be serious. If he had used all his strength, I'm afraid I would have died on the spot. Su Qian performed a few sets of fist techniques casually. He was in an unprecedented good state. He gathered qi in his fists, lowered his waist, and strode down, hanging on the ground across the air. Bang! Bang! The ground made a muffled sound, cracked like a spider web, and dust filled the air. Su Manor. Su Nian frowned and paced back and forth in the back hall. Su Pingzi sat in his chair with a sullen face, not saying a word. The aunt looked at her eldest daughter, whose fingers were twisting the corners of her dress, her eyes were slightly red, and her delicate eyebrows were tightly furrowed. Sensing her mother's gaze, Su Lingyu pursed her lips and cried out, "Mother! Don't walk all over the place, you're giving me a headache." His aunt scolded his son in frustration and probed, "Master, let's wait for the news. The best choice is to be taken away by the night watchman and not do anything." Second Uncle Su said in a deep voice. The aunt bit her bright-colored lips and suddenly stomped her foot. She said angrily, "It's better for you to run around and gain some connections than to just sit here." Su Nian frowned. "What connection? We still don't know why the night watchman took Big Brother away. Now is not the time to make a deal. You only know how to cause trouble, only know how to cause trouble." His aunt scolded. The hand hidden in his sleeve clenched into a fist. At this moment, the gatekeeper old Zhang ran in. Before he even entered the front hall, his voice could be heard, "Old master, eldest brother has sent someone to deliver a message." Su Xinyi was the first to greet them, and the whole family stood up from their chairs. Su Lingyu's skirt fluttered as she fell to the side of the door and stared at the gatekeeper, old Zhang, with unease. The gatekeeper, old Zhang, stood on the steps in front of the hall and said, "Dallin said that he's already a night watchman. He won't be coming home tonight, so don't miss him." He became the night watchman. Su Pingzi and Su Nian looked at each other in confusion. Accompanied by his two colleagues, the squinty-eyed man and the stoic man, Su Qian received a piece of clothing that did not fit him and a waist token from the office of the yamen. There was a copper gong and a standard long blade. "I'll probably have to wait 2 days for the fitting uniform. This copper gong is a magic tool unique to the night watchman." Song Tingfeng chewed on a jelly bean and said, "It has 2 uses. First, it can be tied to the chest as a shield to protect vital parts. It could withstand a full-force attack from a spirit-forging expert. 2. Strike the gong to create sound waves, which can shake the enemy's mind and cause dizziness, headache, and other negative effects. It sounds ordinary, but the heart-protecting mirror that Songqing gave me can withstand 3 attacks from a spirit-forging stage cultivator and 1 attack from a copper skin and iron bones. Isn't this the enhanced gong, a product of the Directorate of Celestials? Su Qian's heart stirred. Of course, only a 4th-grade array master from the Directorate of Celestials can forge magical artifacts. Song Tingfeng said. Come on time tomorrow. The boss said you'll be following us from now on. The night watchman had at least 2 people, and at most 4 people, guarding different areas of the capital. Huangxiao and I have just finished our night patrol, so we've been on a day patrol for the past 3 days. Then which area should I be guarding? Su Qian was a little reluctant. The night shift was even more inhumane than the 996 blessings. The regions are temporarily set. Every time we rotate, we will be randomly assigned regions. This is to prevent some ill-intentioned night watchmen from stepping on the spot and embezzling the watch. Song Tingfeng smiled and said. Stealing silver or picking flowers. Of course, such cases are rare, but we must be careful. There are scumbags in every department, Su Qian nodded. At this moment, an official hurriedly came over and said, Lord Song, Lord Zhu, Li Yinluo has summoned you. Brother Spring is looking for us. Su Qian followed his 2 colleagues to Li Yuchun's office. The room was clean and tidy without any smell. The letters were arranged neatly. The 2 cups had the same blue and white pattern on them. The potted plants were placed in the same way. Every silver gong had an independent office called the hall. In this era, sitting in an office was called sitting in the hall. Yin Gong and the others didn't go out to patrol. This was the work of a small group of police officers. Li Yuchun's office was called Spring Breeze Hall. The room was clean and tidy without any smell. The letters were arranged neatly. The 2 cups had the same blue and white pattern on them. The potted plants were placed in the same way. Brother Spring was truly an exquisite old man. Su Qian glanced at Spring Breeze Hall. In the spacious hall, Li Yuchun sat in front of a table and pushed a file to the side. Traces of demons have appeared on the Great Yellow Mountain in Taikang County. They've eaten many people. You guys go there and investigate the situation. The 6th Fan School of the government will assist in the case, and they're already waiting outside the yamen. Well, Su Qian, you should go too. You can gain some experience. You didn't do the combat power test, did you? Just treat it as a real battle. Demons eat people. He had just taken up the post and he already encountered such a thing. Am I a lucky guy or an unlucky guy? Chapter 67. 67 Case Analysis, 1. There were 2 counties in the capital city, Taikang and Chang'an. Song Tingfeng opened the file and read it. Su Qian and Zhu Guangxiu stood on the left and right, staring at the file together. The contents of the file were as follows. To the north of Taikang County, there was a great yellow mountain. The main peak was more than 1,000 meters high, and the mountain range spanned more than 10 miles. It was rich in limestone. It fed the hundreds and thousands of gray households in the surrounding area. The gray households referred to the craftsmen who harvested and produced lime. Since the middle of the year, a demon had emerged from the river in the area of the Great Yellow Mountain. It often came ashore to devour living people, and many people had already lost their lives to it. Lack of detail. Su Qian, an experienced criminal detective, made a judgment after reading the file. This should be a case that has just been reported, so we need to investigate and perfect the case file. Li Yuchun's gaze swept over the 3 of them, and with a serious expression, he said, Su Ninjian, tighten your knife by 2 inches. The position of the gong isn't straight enough. Tilt it 1 inch to the left. Are you crazy? You must have late-stage obsessive-compulsive disorder. Yes. Su Qian said. As he walked out of Spring Breeze Hall and crossed the threshold, Su Qian suddenly felt a lump under his foot. He naturally lowered his head to pick it up, but suddenly froze. Silver. It was even heavier. Let's go, Song Tingfeng turned his head and urged. Oh, okay. Su Qian put the silver pieces into his pocket and followed him. In the hall, Li Yuchun took out the money bag from the box and hung it on her waist. She was about to leave when she suddenly frowned. He opened the money bag and poured out a pile of broken silver. After counting it carefully, he immediately frowned. I lost 3 silver coins. As a person who was ridiculed by his colleagues for not getting over money, 3 maces of silver was enough for him to feel the pain until dark. The 3 of them met the bailiffs from the capital governor's office outside the night watchman's office. There were also 3 people. The leader was actually a woman, and the other 2 were slightly younger. The capital governor's office was also known as the government office. The 3 bailiffs' uniforms were similar to Su Qian's. They were black in color, and their neckline and cuffs were lined with red. The word capture was not embroidered on the chest, but a majestic divine beast swan ni. 1 was in the qi refining stage, and 2 were in the essence refining stage. Su Qian observed the 3 of them quietly. The woman in the lead cupped her fists and said, "Milords, I am Lu Cheng. I've already ordered people to bring the horses to the city gate. Let's get on the carriage and talk." Riding a horse was to hasten the journey, while riding a carriage was to give everyone some space to discuss matters without wasting time. The night watchman had a high status, and the other government offices' bounty hunters were naturally shorter than them. However, although this Qi refining stage girl called him Lord, her attitude was neither humble nor arrogant. A spacious carriage was parked on the side of the street, and 6 people could sit in it without feeling crowded. The 3 night watchmen sat on one side, while the 3 from the government office sat on the other side. Song Tingfeng introduced himself with a smile, as well as Zhu Guangxiao and Su Qian. You should be familiar with this person. During the silver tax case, he was locked up in the magistrate's office. The 3 constables from the capital governor's office carefully examined Su Qian. The female constable who called herself Lu Qing cupped her fists and said, "I've long heard of your great name." The tax money case was handled by the government. As the head constable of the government, she remembered Su Qian. At that time, I felt that this person was quite capable and repeatedly persuaded the prefectural magistrate to recruit him to take up a position in the magistrate's office. Seeing that Su Qian had become the night watchman, Lu Qing sighed with regret. Su Qian smiled and said a few humble words, while he subtly sized up the female constable. It was quite rare for a woman to be an arresteur. Not all the women of the Dafeng dynasty were raised in their boudoir. For some of the women with extremely high talent, the various yamen would give them a certain amount of cultivation. This female constable was pretty, about 30 years old. Her eyebrows were thicker than the average woman's, and she looked valiant and heroic. Her graceful figure exuded the vigor of a female leopard. Her chest was bulging, probably because she was wearing a bra. Speaking of which, Su Qian finally understood why the silver tax case was not transferred to the Ministry of Justice, but was handled by the government and the night watchman. Back then, he had felt that it was strange. This was because Vice Minister Zhou of the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Revenue were exchanging glances and had an accomplice. He only realized these details now. The contents of the dossiers are simple and crude, and many details are not clearly explained. The case was taken over by your government first, so let's exchange information. Song Tingfeng said. When did the monsters appear? June and July. The female constable's voice was slightly misty and magnetic. Did anyone see the monster's appearance clearly? Song Tingfeng asked again. In the beginning, the local grey households often disappeared. When the family searched for them, they found monster claw marks and blood by the river. After that, the grey households disappeared one after another, and the claw marks on the riverbank increased. The local village chief has gathered the grey households and cast a net in the river, planning to kill the demons. But it didn't work, and the net was easily bitten through. It was amphibian. Su Qi said in peace. Song Tingfeng frowned and asked, what I'm curious about is, Why did you only report what happened in June and July now? The demons only ate the grey households that entered the mountain and didn't attack the village, so the Taikang County magistrate didn't care at first. Only when more and more people died did they send hunters to work with the grey households to kill the monsters, but they found nothing. As Lu Qing spoke, she kept looking at Su Qian, but to her disappointment, the talent who had solved the tax and silver case kept frowning and silent. After a few times, the county magistrate of Taikang was no longer willing to care about it. Or rather, as the capital investigation approached, not only did he not deal with the case, but he also intended to suppress it. Then why did you report it? Zhu Guangxiao asked in a deep voice. Lu Qing was silent for a moment and said, the grey households don't dare to go up the mountain to burn their ashes, but they still have to pay taxes. They have no choice but to take a detour into the mountain and avoid the river. However, something unexpected happened. The 20-odd people who went into the mountains to burn the ashes never returned. The nearby grey households had no choice but to report it to the magistrate's office. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao looked at each other and did not say anything. Knock, knock. At this time, Su Qian knocked on the long bench, looked at the three people from the capital governor's office, and asked, do you have a map of the Yellow Mountain and the nearby villages? Yes, we did. Considering that we unknown the monster's realm, we plan to explore on our own first. We don't want to bring the local grey households in case of an accident. Lu Qing looked at his colleague who was sitting on the side, and his colleague took out a picture book from the bag he carried with him. Su Qian took the map and slowly unfolded it. It was a geomancy map of the Great Yellow Mountain Range. After looking at it carefully for a moment, Su Qian said, I have a guess, and I think I should let you know. Everyone in the car looked over. Song Tingfeng smiled until his eyes narrowed. The female constable's eyes brightened slightly. She straightened her posture and said, please speak. Su Qian said, it attacks the people rhythmically. In other words, it has a strong purpose. This might not be a simple demon rebellion. Why do you say that? Lu Qing furrowed her delicate eyebrows. At first, it only devoured the grey households near the river. Then, it began to expand its range, spreading out from both sides of the river, until they entered the mountains and devoured the grey-robed men. This was not just for hunting. First of all, the Great Yellow Mountain is a river that stretches for hundreds of miles, and there is no lack of fish and shrimp in the river. Wild beasts chose their food based on their environment and not their own taste. If it didn't lack food, it wouldn't go into the mountains to hunt for people just to have a good meal. Secondly, if it's an intelligent monster, it'll be different from wild beasts in that it likes to eat people. It would not have turned a blind eye to the nearby villages. However, it didn't. It only ate the grey households near the Great Yellow Mountain. According to the analysis of behavioral psychology, it's a form of intentional driving. Behavioral psychology? Lu Qing pondered and said, divide the territory. Without waiting for Su Qian's reply, Song Tingfeng shook his head. No, if it had intelligence, it would never have divided its territory in such a way. To take up a piece of land in the suburbs of Beijing was no different from courting death. And if it was just a wild beast, it wouldn't drive away the grey house. Lu Qing thought for a moment, and his pupils shrank. Is there anything in the Great Yellow Mountain that it cares about? The carriage fell into a brief silence. The typos in the first chapter have been corrected. Well, I'll change them first. Chapter 68. 68 or 1. The carriage quickly left the inner city, and several good official stallions were waiting at the city gate with the white laborers. Su Qian and the others got on fast horses and passed through the streets and downtown areas of the outer city. It only took them an hour to leave the outer city. The 6 riders immediately sped up and rushed to the Great Yellow Mountain. The official horses run really fast. This is almost 50 yards. Could the horses in my previous life run this fast? Su Qian muttered in his heart. Was this the difference in the amount of spiritual energy that would often appear in novels? This guess was reasonable, because the instinct of qi cultivation was a method of breathing. The group arrived at the edge of the Great Yellow Mountain at noon. They stopped by the official road and tied the horse rope to a tree trunk on the side of the road. After eating some dry food, they took a narrow path into the mountain. The 6 of them rushed forward and arrived at the river that flowed under the Great Yellow Mountain after 15 minutes. After searching along the river for a moment, they found a few blurry footprints, about 3 feet long, 1.5 feet wide, and 4 toes. Lu Qing and his 2 colleagues took off the bags on their backs, took out the explosives, and distributed them to Su Qian and the other 2. With the claw marks as the center, we'll go downstream and throw explosives. You guys go upstream and see if you can force the monster out of the river. This was a plan that had been set up long ago. The Dafeng dynasty was very strict with the management of gunpowder. The recipe was kept a secret, and the materials needed to make gunpowder were all monopolized by the imperial court. Even the night watchman, Lu Qing, and the other yeoman's fast hands only knew a little about the composition of gunpowder. He could smell it. Both parties lit the explosives and threw them into the river. Boom! A muffled explosion rang out, and the river water splashed up several feet high. Soon, the explosives were used up. The group stood on the shore and looked at the rolling muddy waves. They waited for a long time, but they did not see any monsters emerging from the river. It would be great if we had the help of the astrologers, Su Qian said with emotion. The aura observation technique could lock onto the location of a demon by observing its demonic aura. Song Tingfeng snorted and said in a low voice, "The astrologers of the Directorate of Celestials are nobler than us. They only listen to the Emperor. Don't expect to bother them with such a small case." The astrologers' warlocks were very noble? I don't think so. You haven't seen their expressions when they look at me with respect. Su Qian nodded in agreement. When the 2 sides met, Song Tingfeng shrugged his shoulders. It seems that it won't come out. My suggestion is to go into the mountains and take a look. That is, if there really is something in the Great Yellow Mountain. First, check the area where the Grey households are collecting limestones, Su Qian added. Lu Qing muttered to himself before nodding. The 2 groups of people entered the mountain in batches, one in front and one behind, separated by dozens of meters. Song Tingfeng looked at Lu Qing's back and pouted, "This female constable from the magistrate's office has an amazing figure. Look at her butt, it's tight and firm, and her legs are strong. Although the girls of the Academy's workshop are full of life, they're still too weak." Agree. Moreover, this kind of woman who practices martial arts has waistlines, smooth curves, and tight thighs. She might even have light abdominal muscle. This made me think of my wife, Tifa, but she seems to be used to wrapping her chest, Su Qian said. This is not good. It will cause her chest to deform. Song Tingfeng was stunned for a moment before he burst into laughter. You've noticed it as well. I'm lacking an interesting companion like you. Zhu Guangxiao is a taciturn person who can't even produce a fart with 3 blows. For men, talking about dirty things was always an interesting entertainment that killed time. Zhu Guangxiao looked at him and kept quiet. House Hui mainly gathered at the main peak of the Great Yellow Mountain. From a distance, the group could see the exposed rocks of the mountain, which looked like white spots on a human face. Years and years of mining had destroyed this towering main peak, leaving thousands of holes. Both parties searched aimlessly in the mountains for a long time, but they did not find anything of value. When they were drinking water together, Lu Qing said, "Not only does the Great Yellow Mountain have high-quality limestone, but it also has rich vegetation, which can be cut down on the spot to be used as dye. It is very convenient for the Grey households to open the kiln, as they dig and burn and shatter. There's a river at the foot of the mountain, so transportation is convenient. It's easy to save firewood, but it's easy to gain. Another bailiff from the magistrate's office added, that's why the taxes are heavy. After we can't mine the ashes, we're dead. Therefore, he reported it to the government office. Su Qian was silent for a moment, then sighed and said, the high taxes have driven the refugees. The people's wealth is the most delicious food. The crowd fell silent, and no one dared to answer. Song Tingfeng coughed and changed the topic, the demons don't come out of the water, so we don't have enough manpower to search the mountain. Constable Liu, do you have any suggestions? Although he was still lusting after her body just now, Song Tingfeng would not look down on her because of her big chest and perky butt. Lu Qing pondered and said, we'll split into 3 groups of 2. We'll look for the village chiefs in the nearby villages. I'll go to the magistrate and ask for a sorcerer from the Directorate of Celestials to help. That's a waste of time, Su Qian said, waving his hand. Choose one of you to find the village chief of the nearby village. The rest of you stay here. Lu Qing frowned. If there's nothing, I'll go to the Directorate of Celestials to find a warlock, Su Qian said. He said it as if he was very confident. Would the sorcerers of the Directorate of Celestials listen to him? Lu Qing examined Su Qian for a moment, nodded slightly, and sent a companion to invite him. In less than an hour, the bailiff who was at the peak of the spirit refinement realm returned with an old man. My surname is Zhang, and I'm the chief of Hago village outside the Great Yellow Mountain. The old man saluted in an irregular manner and said excitedly. This lowly one has finally waited for the few sirs. If you still didn't come, the people in the village would not have enough food to eat. This matter had dragged on for half a year. Lu Qing stared at him with a sharp gaze and a dignified expression. Let me ask you, where did the last 10 people who entered the mountain die? In the south. They entered from the opposite direction of the river. The chief pointed to the south of the mountain range. There's a kiln there that burns ashes, Song Tingfeng asked. After the exploration, they found that the place with the most ash was not far from the river. The ash-gray households took a detour into the mountain, so they definitely wouldn't dare to choose the side to burn ash. This was because no one could escape once the demon came ashore. A few, not as many as here, the chief nodded. Take us there. Lu Qing said in a deep voice. Yes. The chief seemed to be very afraid of this female constable. The group headed south. The mountain road was rugged, and climbing was extremely difficult. He also had to take care of the chief, this rotten old man, so he didn't walk quickly. This is the place. The chief stopped on the narrow and winding path and pointed ahead. It was an open space that had been excavated. There were piles of rocks and plants. There were a few cave-like kilns that was used to burn ashes. The few of them searched the place but did not find any valuable clues. The place had already been cleaned up. Song Tingfeng and Lu Qing looked at each other and shook their heads. Let's take a look at the brothel, Su Qian said. The few of them took the materials on the spot, lit up a torch, drew out their swords, and carefully entered the earthen kiln. They had thought that the kiln was only used to burn ashes and would not be too deep, but as they walked, Su Qian and the others realized that something was wrong. How was this a brothel? It was clearly a tunnel dug out by people, and they walked for the time it took to make a cup of tea before they reached the end. Song Tingfeng squinted his eyes. There's no need to dig so deep into the kiln. It's obvious that someone is excavating something. There are no traces of smoke or fire on the stone walls. What's going on? Lu Qing called the chief and asked. I don't know. The head of the police was stunned. Su Qian held the torch and observed the rock wall and the ground for a while. He picked up a palm-sized white ore. Was this what they were mining? This doesn't seem to be limestone. Su Qian exerted force in his palm, and qi surged. With a ka-cha sound, the white ore was crushed into powder. He raised the torch and scattered the powder into the fire. Hoo! The torch instantly burst into flames, bright yellow with a hint of dark purple. Saltpeter. Su Qian's pupils shrank. The sudden rise of the flame shocked everyone in the cave. The sound of the saber condensing qi could be heard. Seeing that it was Su Qian's doing, Lu Qing was slightly angry. What are you doing? Chapter 69. 69 A Godly Shot, 1. Su Qian slowly glanced at his colleagues' faces and said in a deep voice, "This is Saltpeter." The name Saltpeter was very unfamiliar to the few martial artists present who had not read much and lacked relevant knowledge. Song Tingfeng exchanged glances with his colleagues and asked with a frown, "Saltpeter," he asked. Su Qian thought about it and said, "I'll change the name so that you'll know more about it. It's the main material for making gunpowder." Everyone's expression changed. Gunpowder was a secret technique of De Feng, and it was one of the means to intimidate the countries of the Four Seas. As long as it was a formula or material related to gunpowder, De Feng would have very strict control over it, mainly saltpeter. Even a night watchman had a smattering of knowledge about the composition of gunpowder. A saltpeter mine was found on the Yellow Mountain. There were also traces of mining. There was no smile on Song Tingfeng's face anymore. He was unusually serious. "Return to the capital immediately and report this." The discovery of the saltpeter mine was more important than the chaos caused by the demons. Lu Qing stared at the gray-haired chief and ordered, "Tie him up and take him away." There was actually a saltpeter mine on the Great Yellow Mountain, and as the chief, he said that he knew nothing about it. No matter what, he had to bring her back for interrogation. The two constables removed the rope from their waists, tied the chief's hands behind his back, and escorted him out. "The chief probably doesn't know about this, or he wouldn't have brought us here. This doesn't make sense from his body language and other details. He didn't seem like an insider. An uncultured old man couldn't possibly be the best actor. The reason why the demons drove the Hades away was because of the saltpeter mine. The possibility was not high, and a professional had to be invited to judge the mining time of the saltpeter mine before a judgment could be made. Su Qian combed through all kinds of thoughts, raised his torch, and stepped out of the cave. Lu Qing's scream rang in his ears. "Be careful!" At the same time, he heard a whistling sound as a black shadow shot from the side. It was so fast that he couldn't react in time. The gong in his chest cracked open. Su Qian felt as if he had been hit by a high-speed train. The powerful impact sent him flying, and his consciousness instantly fell into darkness. The sudden attack caught everyone off guard, and they all made different responses. The three bailiffs from the government office drew their sabers and military crossbows. Zhu Guangxiao swept his leg and kicked the inner elder into the cave. Song Tingfeng pulled out his knife and shouted, "Get in and don't come out." On a huge rock on the side of the cave, there was a 20-foot-long monster. It looked like a salamander and was covered in thick armor. It had a sharp horn on its forehead, and its amber eyes were shining with a cold and brutal light. Its forelimbs had 4 toes. Its cheeks were puffed up as if it was hiding a hidden weapon that could be shot out at any time. A black shadow that was almost invisible to the naked eye shot out and headed straight for Song Tingfeng. The latter's eyes narrowed, and his body reacted faster than his brain. He instinctively leaned back and dodged the attack that pierced his heart. Lu Qing lunged forward and continuously stomped on the rocks, causing the stone powder to fly up. He held the saber with both hands and slashed. Buzz! The blade vibrated at a high frequency. Ding ding ding. With a series of teeth-aching sounds, the blade cut the tip of his tongue, leaving a dazzling spark. Only then did everyone see that the monster's long tongue was covered with a layer of fine scales. The monster seemed to feel the pain and retracted its tongue. It supported its huge body with its 4 limbs and stood on the boulder, looking down at the crowd. It opened its mouth wide and let out a deep roar. The roar startled the wild birds in the forest, and they flapped their wings and flew into the sky. Song Tingfeng and the others were in a daze, as if someone had knocked them on the back of their heads. The spirit refinement realm, his heart trembled, and he forced himself to resist the dizziness. The hilt of the sword hit his chest. Whoosh! The loud and clear sound of the copper gong was like the evening drum and morning bell. It offset the sound waves and brought clarity. After the two of them got out of the trance, they immediately responded. As Lu Qing retreated, he ordered his two colleagues who were at the peak of the spirit refinement realm, use the military crossbows to attack its eyes, jaw, and mouth. These were all relatively soft places. Song Tingfeng took off the gong and threw it to Zhu Guangxiao. You're in charge of containing them from the front. Be careful. He had clearly seen Su Qian's broken gong and knew that a gong could not resist the tongue of a demon. Thinking of Su Qian, Song Tingfeng felt a little sad. Although the gong could withstand a full-force attack from a spirit-forging stage cultivator, the monster's sneak attack had succeeded. Caught off guard, Su Qian's heart could have been shattered by the remaining force. If they only worked for one day, it would be too tragic. Song Tingfeng controlled his emotions and ran with his sword, attacking the monster from the side. The salamander's amber eyes flickered, as if it was about to turn around and spit out its tongue. Zhu Guangxiao beat it to the gong, shaking the demon's spirit. At the same time, he infused his qi into the blade, and with a deep roar, he slashed out a thick blade qi. The curved blade qi swept out, and the air was distorted with high temperature. The monster's body was huge and it was impossible to dodge. It lowered its head and used its hard forehead to resist the blade energy. Then, it wagged its tail as if it had eyes on the back of its head and hit Song Tingfeng with precision. Song Tingfeng blocked with his saber and his body flew backward. On the other side, Lu Qing, who was pouncing over, seized the opportunity and stabbed the monster's abdomen. It still dodged it as if it had predicted it. Warriors and monsters in the spirit-forging realm had strong mental energy that could radiate to their surroundings and make the surrounding scenery appear in their minds. Any form of tracking, ambush, targeting, or killing intent could not escape the detection of a spirit-forging stage martial artist. This was a unique ability of the spirit-forging stage. Oh my god, I almost died before. Could even complete my mission. Finally managed to break through to the qi refining stage. But died in the line of duty before. Could break through to the virgin body. Su Qian woke up after a short period of fainting. He heard the intense sounds of battle in the distance, but he didn't get up. Instead, he crawled forward and climbed to a high point without anyone noticing. He took out the jade mirror in his arms, pulled the back, and poured out the military crossbow and bone-corroding poison that Song Qing had given him. After calmly applying the poison, he raised the military crossbow without a word, aimed at the demon, and waited for an opportunity. Zhu Guangxiao struck the gong, shaking the demon's primordial spirit and blinding his senses. Just as Su Qian was about to shoot, the demon suddenly turned over. Song Tingfeng and the others were stunned, not knowing what it meant by this action. Damn it, a sneak attack was useless against an expert in the spirit-forging stage. Knowing the real reason, Su Qian cursed in his heart. The safest way was to continue waiting and let Song Tingfeng and the others consume the demon, severely injure it, and lower its spiritual consciousness. Then, he would have the chance to use this military crossbow, a spiritual artifact that could kill a spirit-forging stage cultivator, to complete the beheading. Soon, Su Qian gave up on the idea. Lu Qing was like a vigorous female leopard, running with her two strong long legs. With a tender cry, she finally stabbed the high-frequency vibrating tip of the knife into the demon's abdomen. Blood stained the blade, as if it had come into contact with a red-hot iron. It sizzled and steam rose. The demon roared in pain. It tilted its head and its jaw moved, shooting out a black shadow. Lu Qing's face sank, and fear appeared on her beautiful face. She couldn't avoid this attack. At that moment, a figure pounced on her from the side, hugged her plump and strong body, and rolled to the side with her. Song Tingfeng came to the rescue and stabbed the monster's soft abdomen. It forced it to be unable to pursue its companion. Lu Qing felt a pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist, and the man's heavy body was on top of her. Her breathing quickened, and when she saw the man on top of her, she blurted out in surprise. "You didn't die." "Almost," Su Qian grinned. "If it wasn't for the heart protection mirror that Song Qing gave me." Lu Qing was just about to speak when he saw the monster's tail coming down from above. He quickly hugged Su Qian and rolled with him. The place where the two of them had been lying was now filled with deep marks. "We're even." Su Qian smiled at her. The two of them separated and cooperated with Song Tingfeng to attack the demon. The reason why he gave up on sneak attacks and chose to engage in battle was 3 Qi refining cultivators couldn't even defeat a spirit refining monster. In the end, it would be the demon that was not killed, and Su Qian himself who would become the commander of the light. Zhu Guangxiao and Song Tingfeng's eyes brightened when they saw that their companions had not died in the line of duty. They were secretly happy. Su Qian took out the bone-corroding poison and smeared it on the blade. He threw it to Lu Qing and said, "Rub it on the blade." Lu Qing glanced at him, took a few steps back, and applied the poison. Then, he threw it to Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao. Song Tingfeng was more unlucky. When he was applying the poison, he was targeted and attacked by a demon. The long tongue brushed past his arm, and the scales scratched his flesh. Lu Qing made a cut on the demon's body, and the wound quickly turned black and began to emit a rancid smell. She looked at Su Qian in surprise. "It's effective." With the addition of Su Qian, the 4 Qi refining realm cultivators joined forces and 2 essence refining realm cultivators shot arrows to interfere. The advantage was obvious. Demons had endless physical strength and unparalleled eloquence. However, its huge size and body structure made it impossible for it to move around as nimbly as human martial artists. More and more injuries appeared on his body. "Be careful." Su Qian waved his saber and injected qi into it. He split the demon's tail and saved Lu Qing, who had traded injuries for injuries. The web between his thumb and forefinger split open instantly, and blood flowed out. He glared at Lu Qing. "Do you not want to live anymore? Why is a woman working so hard?" Lu Qing stared at him, and for the first time, she had a bit of a woman's coquettishness. "Yes." "Ayaha." The demonic creature shook the air and once again exploded into a terrifying spiritual storm. Su Qian and the others were already prepared. They quickly retreated and put some distance between them to avoid being attacked by the long tongue. Unexpectedly, after the demon forced everyone to retreat, it turned around and fled with its 4 claws flying. It burrowed into the forest and rudely knocked down tree after tree, opening up a clear and rough path. Lu Qing's beautiful face turned pale. "Chase it. Don't let it escape." Once a demon entered the water, it would be difficult to eliminate it. Song Tingfeng leaped up and walked on the branches, like a martial arts master with excellent qinggong. He stepped hard on a tree trunk and flew into the air. He looked down at the entire forest. The muscles of his right hand, which was holding the knife, swelled and tore the loose sleeve. "Ha!" The saber shot out, drawing a silver light beam in the air. A second later, the painful roars of the monsters came from the forest. Song Tingfeng was exhausted and fell into the forest. Zhu Guangxiao followed up. His qinggong was not as good as Song Tingfeng's, but his explosive power was not any weaker. He ran close to the ground and caught up with the demon. He roared and rushed into the sky, slashing at the demon. "Pa!" The monster with a knife in its back swept its tail and sent him flying before it continued to run for its life. Lu Qing and Su Qian were the only ones left chasing the monster. The female constable, who was as strong and vigorous as a female leopard, bit the monster's back. She did not fall, but she also did not catch up. Soon, they were out of the forest. After chasing for a while, they could see the great river. Plop! The monster plunged into the river water, causing a splash. In her disappointment, the valiant female constable caught a glimpse of Su Qian leaping high into the air. He took off a military crossbow from his waist and pulled the trigger without aiming. The moment the arrow was shot out, a powerful chi fluctuation exploded. The female constable didn't even catch the arrow's shadow before she heard the sound of it entering the water. A few seconds later, a miraculous scene happened. Blood-colored water rose from the surface of the river, and a 20-foot-long monster slowly floated up. Its cause of death was an arrow that had pierced through its head. Lu Qing turned his head in a daze and looked at the young and tall night watchman. "I've always been lucky," Su Qian shrugged. Chapter 70. Su Qian, I'm going to the Imperial Academy to avenge my humiliation. 1. He could actually predict the position of the monster after it entered the water, and it accurately shot through the brain. His keen insight and judgment were simply terrifying. As a woman, Lu Qing was the head constable of the government office, and she was able to suppress all the heroes. She was proud of herself. However, at this moment, she was completely convinced by Su Qian's divine skill and admitted defeat. Not only was he strong, but he was also humble and low-key, much better than those men who looked down on women. Whoosh! If it wasn't for the fact that the monster was injured and poisoned, and there was a layer of water between them, I might not have been able to hit it with one arrow. Su Qian put away the military crossbow, feeling a little regretful. This crossbow could only be shot 3 times, and its durability was too poor. After 3 shots, it would become an ordinary military crossbow. It was supposed to be used to save his life, but it was a pity to use it against demons. Lu Qing followed his gaze and also noticed the ordinary-looking military crossbow. When he saw it, he was immediately shocked. The military crossbow was engraved with complicated and mysterious formation patterns. When he thought of the chi movement when the arrow was shot out, it was not difficult to guess that it was a magic weapon. The gong was the only magic tool for the night watchman. This was his private property. When he said that he could invite a sorcerer from the Directorate of Celestials, he was not bragging. Lu Qing's impression of this man changed again, and his favorability increased. Su Qian turned sideways to stop her from looking at her baby. He smiled and said, "If we don't fish it up, it will be flushed away." What a great contribution! Lu Qing pursed his lips and chuckled reservedly as he nodded. The two of them entered the river together and dragged the monster's body ashore. At this moment, Song Tingfeng supported Zhu Guangxiao and walked out of the forest unsteadily. "You killed it?" Song Tingfeng couldn't hide his smile, as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. The reticent Zhu Guangxiao let out a long breath. "How are you?" Su Qian was concerned about Zhu Guangxiao's injury. "It's nothing," the man with the sealed gourd shook his head. "I just broke 2 ribs." The 4 of them rested by the riverbank for a while, and the 2 constables in the spirit refinement realm led the chief down the mountain. When the chief saw the monster's corpse, he was both angry and afraid. He carefully stepped forward and gave it a kick, then fled with an agile posture that a bad old man should not have. After waiting for a few seconds and seeing that there was no response, he was relieved. He rushed over and punched and kicked, unable to rage. After venting his anger, the village chief knelt down and kowtowed to Su Qian and the others. Su Qian waved his hand. "Let me ask you. When was the cave in the south mined?" The chief officer thought for a moment. "That's a kill left behind in the past. There's not much limestone in the south, and the road is difficult to walk on. It was abandoned many years ago. This old man, I wonder when it was mined to this extent. Did people go there often in the past?" Su Qian asked. "It doesn't cut off human traces," the chief said. "Can't you just say that someone leaves occasionally? Why are you arguing with me?" "You should go back first and wait for the official to summon you," Su Qian said. The old man had been kicked by Zhu Guangxiao and was slightly injured. Su Qian saw that he had been holding his waist. Lu Qing had no objection to Su Qian's way of handling things. He immediately asked a colleague to send the chief back. The rest of the people began to meditate to recover their strength and replenish their water and food. 15 minutes later, the 3 horses dragged the monster's corpse and slowly walked on the official road. On the way, Lu Qing vividly described Su Qian's godly operation, and his words were filled with admiration. Song Tingfeng approached Su Qian on his horse and said in a low voice, "She seems to have a good impression of you. What do you want to say?" Su Qian replied in a soft voice. "Constable Lu is quite famous in the 6 fan school in the capital, and he's still unmarried," Song Tingfeng said. "Every man desires to be a loner on a certain path, don't you think so?" In this era, they were considered old. Leftover women work hard, Su Qian smiled. Song Tingfeng squinted his eyes, sighed and shook his head. "A person like me is only suitable for the Imperial Academy. Even if the tree-lined path you're looking forward to is covered in frost every morning and dusk." Su Qian laughed. Zhu Guangxiao frowned, not understanding what his 2 colleagues were talking about. "By the way, what was that move you used just now?" Su Qian asked. "Howling Wind swordsmanship," Song Tingfeng said. Swordsmanship. The knife technique that Constable Lu had used in the battle was also a unique skill. Wait, sword technique? Su Qian stared at the knife on Song Tingfeng's waist. "Who said that a saber can't be used with a sword?" Song Tingfeng shrugged. That's right, who said that one couldn't kill someone without a spearhead?" Su Qian cursed in his heart. As they talked and laughed, they saw a group of commoners coming from the road and gathering toward the official road. The one leading them was the chief officer, as well as the refined bailiff who had sent him back. "They insisted on coming over to thank us." The constable shook his head helplessly. The chief held a basket of eggs in his hand and held it high in front of Su Qian. "These are all the eggs that our village has gathered. Sir, please accept them. In the past 6 months, we really couldn't live happily anymore. If it wasn't for the several Darren helping us to eradicate the evildoers, to say that we are lawless and can't pay the taxes, we could only escape and become refugees." Su Qian looked at the chief's nervous eyes and swept his gaze over the sallow and emaciated faces of the grey households. "All right." He took the basket of eggs with a smile and hung it on the saddle. The surrounding people smiled. Only now did they dare to talk loudly, pointing at the monster's body and cursing. "If I insist on not doing it, I will tell them loudly, he did not take a single needle or thread from the commoners. They would probably be frightened." After returning to the capital, the monster's body was collected by the bailiffs waiting outside the city. They pulled the cart, covered it with a white cloth, and cleaned up the traces before entering the city. "The saltpeter mine is not a small matter. I have to report it?" Song Tingfeng cracked an egg and swallowed the liquid. "Parasite warning." Su Qian nodded. When they returned to the yamen, the 3 of them did not have time to write a report. They went straight to the Spring Breeze Hall and told Li Yuchun what had happened. Brother Spring's face turned solemn after hearing this. "Well done, Su Qian. You've done a great job." Li Yuchun walked up to the 3 of them and helped them tidy up their clothes. He returned to his seat and muttered, "What do you guys think?" The 3 gongs looked at each other. Song Tingfeng said. "According to Su Ningjian's analysis, the demons were consciously driving out the grey households. After our investigation, we found a saltpeter mine in the mountains. This is definitely not a coincidence. Do you have a more concrete and powerful analysis result?" Li Yuchun retorted. Song Tingfeng spread his hands. "Boss, I'm good at killing people, but handling cases. It was just average." The 3 of them looked at Su Qian at the same time. Li Yuchun's eyes were filled with anticipation. "What do you think, Ningjian?" The 3 of them had experienced Su Qian's ability to analyze cases. Although he was just a newbie who had just stepped into the qi refining stage, he always felt an inexplicable sense of security with him around. People would subconsciously rely on the strong in a field they were not good at. Su Qian thought for a moment and said, Then let me add something. I'm now sure that the reason why the demons chased away the Grey households in the surrounding area is to monopolize the saltpeter mine. At first, I thought that it might have chosen to lay eggs in the Yellow Mountain area and was on its way back to the capital. I found out that it was a male. There's just one question that I can't figure out. Why would the demons target saltpeter mines? Other than medicine, this thing can also be used to make gunpowder. Of course, saltpeter had other uses, but Su Qian felt that the generation gap was too deep, so he might as well not say it. He glanced at Li Yuchun subconsciously and was surprised to find that the other party was stunned. He stood there stiffly, as if he had figured something out. "It's the demon race, it's the demon race," he muttered. Li Yuchun didn't explain. He spread out the paper and picked up his brush to write. Song Tingfeng brought Su Qian to the writing room to fill out the injury document. "After we finish this, we can rest for 2 days. We don't have to work tomorrow. You have to learn how to seek benefits for yourself," Song Tingfeng said. This was the legendary work injury, no, paid leave. Su Qian deeply agreed with his colleague's wit. It was already dusk when he left the study room. Su Qian planned to go home and rest. "Wait." Song Tingfeng called out to him, "Didn't we agree to go to the academy tonight?" Su Qian was stunned. He immediately looked at Zhu Guangxiao, who was beside Song Tingfeng, and asked in surprise, "How are your injuries?" "The girls from the Academy of Public Relations know how to serve people," Zhu Guangxiao said in a deep voice. Did this mean that they would move by themselves? Su Qian cupped his hands in salute. Indeed, how could he give up the pleasant social interaction between colleagues for a small injury like a fracture? It didn't matter if he didn't go home. Second uncle knew that the night watchman had to be on night duty. As for auntie, well, she obviously doesn't care if I go home or not. She only groans at me all day. Su Qian, who was not going home that night, had to have a social gathering with 2 colleagues in line with the atmosphere of the great minister. Destination, Imperial Academy Division. He had experienced many similar social events in his previous life, but the form had changed from a dinner to a brothel. In Dafeng, or rather in this era, brothels were the first choice for social activities. The night watchman's waist token allowed the 3 of them to ignore the curfew in the inner city. When they met their fellow night watchmen, they turned a blind eye after being routinely questioned. The 3 of them walked through the alley of the academy's workshop. Song Tingfeng, whose eyes would narrow when he smiled, said, "In the future, when you patrol at night and meet colleagues near the Imperial Academy, you can turn a blind eye, but if you meet them in other areas, it's best not to relax. You can't guarantee what their purpose is for going out in the middle of the night. I've once heard an old senior mention an example. There was once a night watchman who had a grudge with someone. He sneaked into someone's house at night and exterminated the entire family. They couldn't find anything after the incident. It took a lot of effort to lock onto the murderer, who was also a night watchman. We'll talk about the details during the tea party." Su Qian smiled and nodded. The inside story of the industry was a very valuable experience. If you meet a jealous colleague who likes to scheme against you, the other party might not be willing to tell you. "By the way, which courtyard are we going to?" Zhu Guangxiao, who was a man of few words, spoke. "Yingmei Pavilion. I'll just randomly pick one." There were 2 answers. The first one came from Su Qian, and the second one was from Song Tingfeng. Zhu Guangxiao and Song Tingfeng looked at Su Qian together. Their eyes seemed to be saying, "What are you thinking?" Song Tingfeng smiled and patted his new colleague's shoulder. "Miss Fuxiang's tea stall costs 10 taels of silver, and she rarely accompanies guests. Usually, there will only be tea stall customers for a few days, and no curtain guests. This is a brilliant method. It's hunger marketing, I know." Su Qian remembered that the 2 of them didn't know that he had set Jolie up. It was naturally impossible to publicize such an inside story. She did not know that he had once slept with the floating fragrance courtesan. It was just sleeping. Lady Floating Fragrance won't be interested in us, Zhu Guangxiao reminded. He didn't say much, but what he said was either pertinent or kind. His two colleagues didn't want to waste money at the Yingmei Pavilion. Su Qian thought for a while and said, just take it as an eye-opening trip. I'll pay for the tea gathering. As a newcomer, treating the company's seniors to seafood was a common means of social interaction. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao smiled. No one would refuse a kind treat. Not long after, they arrived at the entrance of Yingmei's small pavilion. Su Qian looked at the courtyard and thought, I'm here to avenge my humiliation. Chapter 71 71 Strange Information, 1. After paying the money for the tea stall, he entered the courtyard. There were 7 or 8 guests sitting in the room with the burning charcoal, drinking tea and chatting. They were in a good mood. 6 dancers in colorful clothes were wearing thin silk dresses, dancing gracefully, twisting their slender waists and full buttocks. Su Qian looked around, but did not see the courtesan who was a lady from a wealthy family outside but a coquettish courtesan in bed. The tea gathering wasn't just about drinking, there were also programs such as listening to music and watching dances. And courtesan ladies didn't always appear to accompany guests. At the same time, the guests also needed free space. Drinking games were interesting, but not conducive to private communication. Some guests had come in groups to drink and bond. At this time, they needed some freedom and let them play on their own. The 3 of them took their seats. Song Tingfeng shrugged and smiled with his eyes narrowed. It seems that Miss Floating Fragrance doesn't intend to accompany the guests tonight. Why do you say so? Su Qian asked. There's a time limit for the tea gathering, Song Tingfeng explained. Usually, a group of guests can only stay here for 2 hours at most. They'll either continue to the next table or leave. And if the drinking token wants to have fun, it will take about 2 hours. In other words, we're not playing drinking games this time, so of course, Floating Fragrance won't appear. Why do you know the rules of the Imperial Academy so well? You must have visited quite a lot. Su Qian nodded, indicating that he had learned something new. After the dance, the dancers took a short break. A young man in a light green Confucian robe stood up, raised his cup, and looked around. Is young Master Yang Ling around? He asked 3 times in a row, but no one answered. He sat down in disappointment. At the next table, a middle-aged man dressed like a rich man asked curiously, Brother, who is this Yang Ling? The water is clear and shallow, and the fragrance floats on the moon at dusk. The young man in the light green Confucian robe raised his chin slightly. Have you heard of it? I have some impression. The middle-aged man dressed like a rich man recalled for a moment. Of course, the moment this poem was written, it was called the most beautiful poem in history. Even you people should have heard of it. The young man in the Confucian robe raised his head proudly. A good line that only US scholars can come up with. The middle-aged man dressed like a rich man was puzzled, then why is young master looking for someone here? As the 2 of them conversed, the customers at the side also stopped talking and listened. That's because this masterpiece was created in the Yingmei Pavilion. This poem was given to Miss Fu Xiang by young master Yang Ling. Using the plum tree as a metaphor for a person, bringing out the beauty of each other. It's truly a beautiful thought. No wonder Yingmei Pavilion has so many benefactors recently, no wonder Lady Fuxiang never shows up. That's right. I heard that Miss Floating Fragrance has stopped accompanying guests. The water is clear and shallow, and the fragrance is floating in the evening. What a beautiful poem. I really want to meet young Lady Fu Xiang and that talented scholar. Hearing this, the young man in the light green Confucian robe sighed, that young Master Yang only appeared once at the Academy Square, and there was no news of him after that. The directorate sent people to Changle County School to find him, but they couldn't find him. There's such a strange thing. Everyone was shocked. The young man in the light green Confucian robe said helplessly, I come to the Yingmei Pavilion every day just to wait for him. It's not just me, all the students in the capital want to make friends with him. This is great, Lady Floating Fragrance is no longer a woman we can covet. Song Tingfeng clicked his tongue. Zhu Guangxiao also sighed. Is this considered raising the AC price imperceptibly? Su Qian lowered his head and drank his tea, feeling guilty. Song Tingfeng looked at his new colleague and said, it's a pity that you're good at solving cases, but not good at writing poems. If you could be like Yang Ling and write an ancient poem, Miss Fu Xiang would be willing to pay for it. Pay. Su Qian found the spot. The rumors about the love affairs between a prostitute and a poor scholar are fabricated. The poor scholar could occasionally come up with a good sentence for a prostitute, and her value would rise greatly. This was a mutually beneficial thing, and those young and famous scholars were the targets of flattery from the prostitutes. Don't talk about not wanting silver, I'm even willing to pay for it. Yunlu Academy's layman Zi Yang was a talented poet back then. After he became the top scorer, he stayed in the Imperial Academy for 3 months and didn't even pay a single silver. Song Tingfeng said. Zhu Guangxiao nodded in affirmation. Song Tingfeng realized that his new colleague was dumbfounded. It was as if he had received a great shock, but it was also as if he had heard some exciting news. Even his breathing was rapid. A maidservant who was serving the guests left the table in a hurry. After staring at Su Qian for a few seconds, she looked ecstatic. She left the guests and ran out of the room, not caring about her image. Not long after, a well-dressed courtesan's wife appeared. Her long dress dragged on the ground, and the gorgeous jewelry in her black hair and her beautiful face reflected each other. The thickness of the dress was just right. It didn't look bloated, but highlighted the exquisite and curvy mature figure. It wouldn't make people feel that he was acting coquettishly. Su Qian was obviously more particular about her dressing than when they first met. She didn't look like a courtesan of the academy, but rather a social butterfly with a certain status and a well-known beauty. Lady Fu Xiang's beautiful eyes swept across the guests and stopped on Su Qian. Fu Xiang looked at me just now. Song Tingfeng was slightly shocked. Zhu Guangxiao glanced at him, straightened his back, and said, unconvinced, they're looking at me. After greeting the guest, Fu Xiang said in a soft voice, let's dance together to liven up the mood for the guests. Chapter 72. Chapter 71 Strange Information, 1. The guests were all pleasantly surprised. They didn't expect that the most popular courtesan of the education square would show up. The customers with sharp minds thought deeper. The floating fragrance courtesan was known for her zither and poetry, but not for her dance. Why did she choose to dance today? With this figure, it would be great if she could dance the pure land of bliss for me. Su Qian admired the beautiful dance and let his imagination run wild. After the song ended, Fu Xiang drank a glass of wine and left with a red face. It's worth it, Song Tingfeng laughed. Zhu Guangxiao nodded. Song Tingfeng raised his glass and gestured to Su Qian, Lady Fuxiang rarely dances, but she plays the zither often. It's your first time at the education workshop, and you're able to see her dance. This money is well spent. It would be great if I could stay in her room tonight. Su Qian raised his glass and returned the toast. Song Tingfeng laughed out loud. Zhu Guangxiao shook his head slightly. Song Tingfeng had just finished laughing when he saw a maidservant walk over and say, young Master Yang, my family's wife invites you to come in for tea. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao looked at Su Qian blankly. Their expressions were a little stiff. Bzzz. The scholar in the light green Confucian robe suddenly stood up in front of the table, revealing a shocked and ecstatic expression, and shouted, young Master Yang, you are Yang Ling? You are Yang Ling? Brother Yang, Brother Yang. Su Qian patted him on the shoulder. See you at the gate of the courtyard at dawn tomorrow. Bzzz. The scholar in the light green Confucian robe suddenly stood up in front of the table, revealing a shocked and ecstatic expression, and shouted, "Young Master Yang, you are Yang Ling? You are Yang Ling? Brother Yang, I'm Du Ying." Su Qian stopped, cupped his hands at him, and left with the maidservant. Yang Ling. The guests in the room widened their eyes, and a few scholars in Confucian robes were ecstatic. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao looked at each other in silence. In the bedroom that was as warm as spring, there was a bath barrel behind the screen. Su Qian was soaking in the hot water that was full of floating petals. She let out a comfortable breath. Fu Xiang, with her fair skin and outstanding figure, knelt by the bathtub and served him, her soft little hands rubbing his body. "I haven't seen you for a few days, but you've become more and more handsome." The courtesan's wife admired Su Qian's strong body, and her bright eyes could not move away. Previously, Su Qian's facial features were quite good. After their reunion today, his appearance had not changed, but he gave off an indescribable temperament. "As long as you like it, my change is worth it?" Su Qian raised his eyebrows. Fu Xiang's face reddened, and she felt a little shy and happy. "You only know how to lie to me. Young master clearly doesn't like me," she said with a bitter expression. Which man could hold her all night without doing anything? When the courtesan's wife woke up the next day, she had a huge doubt about her own charm. "I was little tired that day," Su Qian said. These words sounded like the excuse of an old man in his 40s or 50s. "Are you cold?" he asked, changing the topic. The courtesan's wife immediately nodded and said in an aggrieved tone, "It's cold." Su Qian pulled her into the bathtub. Plop! She screamed without warning. Fu Xiang laid in Su Qian's arms and said coquettishly, "You're annoying." She sat on Su Qian's stomach and wrapped her arms around his neck. She was talking and asking him for poetry. Although Su Qian was a fake, he had a lot of poems in his mind. Occasionally, he would say a few words, which made the courtesan's face and ears red with excitement. "That's right, has young Master Yang heard of Assistant Minister Zhou's dismissal and exile?" Her seemingly casual words put Su Qian on guard. "I heard, it seems that he was impeached by the mighty Marquis," Su Qian said. The courtesan's lady raised her charming and amorous face and gazed at him. She chuckled and said, "It seems like it's because that young Master Zhou did not give up and kidnap the Weiwo Marquis's daughter. That's why they say beauty is like a knife." Su Qian said, half surprised and half emotional. As a veteran in criminal investigation, no one could easily get information from him. However, Fu Xiang might be suspicious. How could there be such a coincidence? That day, they had just finished talking about the past and Jolie had really made a move on the daughter of the mighty Marquis. Well, he might not be suspicious, but he was definitely curious. "I have to strengthen this woman's impression of me and make her lean towards me from the bottom of her heart, so that she won't talk about me to some official one day. Just now, when I saw the young lady dancing, I suddenly felt touched and said a few words." Su Qian put his arm around the beauty's shoulder and said, "This year, we'll be happy for the next year. The autumn moon, the spring breeze, and so on will be leisurely. This year, we'll be happy for the next year, the autumn moon, the spring breeze, and so on." Tears welled up in the courtesan's eyes as she sobbed softly. "Is young master poking at my heart? Young master is so cruel." That night, the courtesan's wife's bed shook until midnight. At dawn the next day, Su Qian dressed up with the help of a slightly haggard beauty, had breakfast and bid farewell to Fu Xiang, who was full of love. When the head maidservant who served Fu Xiang looked at him this morning, her adoring eyes made Su Qian feel proud. When he left the courtyard of the Yingmei pavilion, he saw his two colleagues at the door, who were in high spirits. As expected, he didn't ask me for money, but the beauty's kindness was heavy. "Good morning, you two," Su Qian said in a light tone. The three of them left the alley of the academy workshop side by side. Before they parted, Song Tingfen narrowed his eyes and could not help but ask, "Lady Floating Fragrance, how is it?" The taciturn Zhu Guangxiao also looked over. Su Qian looked straight ahead, with a hint of arrogance and ruffian. The corners of his mouth lifted. "Call me layman Ran in the future." He bought a few rolls of silk in the inner city and rented a carriage to rush back to the Su manor. Second Uncle Su had asked for leave today and had stayed at home to wait for his news. Su Nian didn't study and wasn't in the mood. It was not until Su Qian asked the servants to carry the silk back that the family was relieved. Su Qian did not explain much. He pointed at the silk and smiled. "It's to make clothes for auntie and younger sisters." The auntie was still holding back her anger. She lifted her snow-white and sharp chin and snorted. The little boy pulled on his pants and tried to climb up, shouting, Big brother, I saw big sister hiding and crying secretly yesterday." The oval-faced Su Lingyu's face turned red. Su Qian didn't want to be too intimate in front of his family, so he smiled at the beautiful girl and kicked the little bean into the air like a shuttlecock. He reached out and caught her. The auntie was shocked, but the little boy laughed heartlessly. "You've reached the qi refining stage," second uncle was stunned. After getting Su Qian's approval, second uncle smiled like an old father. In the study, Su Qian briefly explained what had happened to his second uncle and second Lang. Both father and son felt a lingering fear. "Why did the eldest princess send someone to follow you?" Su Nian asked as he looked at his cousin. "I also want to know, maybe I was the only outsider at the academy that day," Su Qian guessed. On the day of the strange phenomenon in the Quasi-Saint Academy, the royal princess was also in the academy. It was impossible for her not to pay attention to this matter. As such, it was reasonable for her to monitor the only outsider that day. "The eldest princess is very scheming," Su Nian said in a deep voice. "Not only has she studied in Yunlu Academy for many years, but she also has a half-master and disciple relationship with Wei Yuan. Her chess skills are superb, and she recommended you as the night watchman, so she definitely didn't just play a casual chess game on a whim. If Big Brother is summoned by her in the future, don't be surprised. Remember to be careful and cautious." Su Qian replied, "Okay." The fact that the proud and arrogant Su Siju was so wary of her meant that the eldest princess was no simple character. After Su Nian finished speaking, he suddenly raised his chin and said, "I've entered the cultivation realm. I've also become an expert of the 8th stage of the scholarly faction." Su Qian was pleasantly surprised. What's so special about the Confucians in the physical cultivation realm? "I'm a righteous man." Su Zinian's lips curled up. "I'll go forward even if there are millions of people." At this moment, Su Qian's heart was filled with pride, and he had the courage to face thousands of soldiers and horses alone. This inexplicable courage lasted for 15 minutes before it slowly dissipated. Cultivating the body is a process of tempering one's literary courage. The words and actions of a Confucian scholar of this realm are convincing. For example, Big Brother felt that what I said made sense, so he unconsciously did as I said. In the future, when I enter the court and become an official, I will be able to solve cases as well as you. No, I'm relying on my real ability, you're cheating." Su Qian said. This was equivalent to a courage buff, the embryonic form of a command. Su Qian's eyes brightened, and he exchanged a look with his second uncle. "Farewell, Big Brother has treated you well. Get lost." Su Niangzhen didn't wait for him to finish and left. A vulgar warrior. Su Qian went back to his courtyard and took a nap. Suddenly, he woke up with a start. The source of his alarm was the small jade mirror hidden under his pillow. A line of small words appeared on the jade mirror. "Ju, where are you?" With the 2 chapters combined, not only did he complete the update, but he also got an alliance master to add more chapters. It was wonderful. Chapter 73. 73 Daoism and Earth Sect, 1. Su Qian stared at the mirror and was stunned for a long time. The mirror spoke. Was it a treasure that had its own consciousness? What did Ju mean? This mirror was called Ju. No, if it was the mirror's own intelligence, it wouldn't have asked where are you? Because I've been sleeping in the same bed as you, every day. Su Qian stared at the mirror and fell into deep thought. He was thinking about 4 questions. First, what kind of treasure was a mirror? Apart from storing items, it could also receive information. Second, was this a message? If it was, then who sent it? Third, who was the old deist? Why did he give me the mirror? Fourth, should I respond? To be safe, Su Qian kept the mirror and didn't intend to respond. He thought, as long as I pretend that it doesn't exist, it won't exist. Moreover, he did not know how to respond. Su Qian went to the courtyard, soaked his head in the water tank, and wiped it with a sweat towel. Then, he left the courtyard. He had already joined the night watchman, but his official working time was the day after tomorrow. The night watchman had to prepare a uniform and a gong for him. It was still early, half an hour past noon. Su Qian first went to the Yamen of Changle County to inform his colleagues and County Magistrate Zhu that he had become the night watchman. County Magistrate Zhu had already received the news that the night watchman had taken Su Qian's household registration from the Changle County government in advance. Su Qian, his colleagues, and County Magistrate Zhu had arranged to have dinner together that night. It was not only a farewell banquet, but also a congratulatory banquet to celebrate his promotion and wealth. The location was, of course, the New Moon Hall, which was not far from the county government. In the official circle, brothels were the first choice. Before that, Su Qian planned to go to the brothel and eat lunch while listening to music. The farewell banquet started at Shenxi and continued until Yushi 35 p.m. During the meal, County Magistrate Zhu sighed and said, "Ninjian, you're from my Changle County's Yamen. It's our Changle County's fortune to be able to become a night watchman. I've always had high hopes for you." He paused, raised his glass, and drank it all in one go. "If I can continue to climb up, County Magistrate Zhu is probably the first person I can trust in the officialdom." Su Qian understood and also finished the wine in his glass. After the banquet ended, the Yaman's fast hands did not leave. The brothel madam called over a group of young and beautiful girls and brought them to the private room for the officials to choose. "She's pretty. In my previous life, there would be a line of young models in the club." Su Qian shook his head. After having a taste of Fu Xiang's beauty, he was no longer interested in ordinary women. After Su Qian made arrangements for County Magistrate Zhu and his fast-handed colleagues, he left the Waning Moon Hall and headed home. When she arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, she found that the lock had been unlocked and candlelight was shining through the room. "Second uncle came to find me." Su Qian pushed open the door and entered the house. In the candlelight of the evening, a young girl in a plain dress sat at the table. She supported her forehead with one hand and nodded her head. Su Qian immediately glanced at the cabinet beside the bed. Seeing that there was no sign of it being opened, she heaved a sigh of relief. Maybe I can consider writing my diary in English." He walked over and gently woke Su Lingyu up. "Where did Big Brother go?" Su Lingyu opened her eyes. Her beautiful eyes were confused for a while, and then they were filled with joy. Under the candlelight, her sharp oval face was like a warm piece of jade, flawless. His eyes were shining. "What are you doing here?" Su Qian said. "Why didn't Big Brother come home for dinner? Father said he must have gone to a brothel," she said softly. "Second uncle was really, you understand me?" No, Su Qian said, "it's just a normal social event. I went to the Yamen on duty, so I invited my colleagues to dinner. However, it was normal for second uncle to think so. A normal martial artist would not stop until he had exhausted all his energy after 10 to 20 years of holding back after entering the chi refining stage. Big brother is drinking since you've already eaten, I'll go back now. The dishes are still hot in the kitchen. Su Lingyu believed her brother's explanation and smiled happily. Su Qian was touched. In this family, other than his second uncle, his sister was the best to him. It's dark, it's not safe to walk at night. Big brother will send you. Su Lingyu didn't refuse. It was about 200 or 300 meters from the small courtyard to the main entrance of the Su mansion. It was indeed not safe for a weak woman to go alone. However, she did not expect that Su Qian would take her to the corner of the courtyard, hold her small waist, and jump into the air. He chose to climb over the wall. As soon as her toes touched the ground, she pushed Su Qian away in a panic and murmured, "Many thanks, big brother." Su Qian watched Su Lingyu's back disappear, then jumped back to his own yard. At this time, he felt an inexplicable palpitation again. He took out the small jade mirror in his arms, and a line of small words slowly appeared on the clean surface of the mirror. "Ju, where are you?" Su Qian frowned. What was going on? The news came in again, and if it was not resolved, it would always feel like a hidden danger. Su Qian leaned against the wall and thought for a long time before deciding to reply. There were two reasons for his reply. First, the mirror was his possession, after all, and if he could thoroughly understand the mirror's function and divinity, it would be beneficial to him. It was like you were holding an AK-47 in your hand, but you were waving it around like a walking stick. Second, he suspected that the message was sent by the old Taoist. If that was the case, he could take the opportunity to figure out why the other party had given him the treasure. An unknown gift made people feel uneasy. Su Qian tried to type a voice message, he's taking a shower. The clean mirror didn't change. Su Qian changed his method. He used his finger as a pen and wrote these words on the mirror. A miraculous scene happened. A line of words appeared on the mirror. 3, she's taking a shower. Transmitting thoughts through touch. Does 3 represent the number of my mirror? The other party was Ju. He also has a mirror. Ju, who are you? Su Qian did not answer him. The other side also fell into silence. After a few minutes, another message came. Ju, where is Senior Golden Lotus? Is he dead or alive? How did you get this mirror? You're a member of the Heaven and Earth Society? Senior Brother Golden Lotus should be the Daoist priest who gave me the mirror. This Jew calls him Senior Brother. They are from the same sect. Heaven and Earth union, how could there be reverse clarity and restoration of vision in the other world? After getting a rough idea of the other party's identity, Su Qian heaved a sigh of relief. He used his finger as a pen and entered the information. 3. I'm not a member of the Heaven and Earth Society. This mirror was given to me by an old Taoist. Ju, how do you prove that you are not a member of the Heaven and Earth Society? Tell me your name. Su Qian felt as if a reader was asking for the delivery address and was planning to give you some local specialties. He instinctively resisted and did not agree. 3. Taoist priest, I'm just a nobody. After a while. Ju, where is the Daoist priest who gave you the mirror? 3. I don't know. After Su Qian sent the message, she waited quietly to see what the other party would say. Ju, I'm Zillion. The Daoist priest who gave you the mirror is my senior brother. This mirror is a magic treasure of our Earth section. Since senior brother has given you this mirror, I believe your esteemed self is not an ordinary person. You must have heard of my Earth sect's great name. Su Qian replied, 3, sorry, I don't know anything. The other side was silent for a long time before replying emotionlessly, Ju, Taoism is divided into 3 sects, heaven, earth, and man. It turned out to be people from the Dao sect. Su Qian's spirit was lifted. Author's note: it's the weekend today. When I woke up, it was already 1:00. Sat up in shock while was dying. I rolled and crawled to switch on my computer to update the chapter. I actually forgot to time the chapter I finished yesterday. Chapter 74. 74 Chapter 73 Horror, 1. 3. What's going on with the Heaven and Earth Society? Ju, the TND Society is a cult and has been coveting our Earth sex magic treasure for a long time. Hee, this magic treasure is also called the Earth Book. It could transmit messages from thousands of miles away. A while ago, I received a distress message from Senior Marshal Brother Golden Lotus. I know that he went to the capital of Great Fen because only by entering the capital can he avoid the pursuit of the Heaven and Earth Society. However, when I rushed to the capital, I lost Senior Brother Golden Lotus's contact method, so I sent a message through the Earth Book and found out that he had given the Earth Book to you. Senior Brother must be in a very critical situation, so he had to give up the Earth Book in order to protect himself. If**ing he meant, who's giving me the blame? Su Qian was stunned. Ju, I just don't know who you are, to be able to make Senior Brother Golden Lotus entrust the Book of the Nether World to you without worry. I'm just a little fast hand, no, I'm just a little night watchman. Su Qian's heart sank. 3. Why can we protect ourselves by abandoning the Book of the Earth? The people of the Heaven and Earth Society can lock onto the location of the Earth Book. Su Qian, the expert of deduction, keenly captured this problem. Ju, this matter involves a secret of my Earth section I can't tell you. The Earth Book is our sect's most precious treasure. I hope you can return it to me. I'll be very grateful. 3. Okay, how do I return it to you? Su Qian was a little reluctant. After all, this was a treasure that could be used as a storage ring. However, considering the risks it came with, he chose to follow his heart. Ju, I'm in the capital. I can come to you at any time. If you don't trust me, you can choose to exchange the address. What do you want? Women, I want warm women. Su Qian almost blurted out. 3. You're too kind, deist priest. It's my responsibility to return the item to its original owner. However, deist priest Golden Lotus told me that this was a treasure of heaven and earth and sold it to me for 500 taels of gold. I'm not asking for money. It's just that since the treasure has been returned to its original owner, the gold naturally has to be returned to its original owner as well. It's an equal exchange, right? Ju, it should be like this. Su Qian put away the mirror and fell into a deep sleep with the dream of 500 taels of gold in her arms. The next day, he changed into the uniform of a night watchman, hung a waist token, a knife, and tied the gong that he had changed yesterday to his chest. She climbed over the wall and went to her second uncle's house for breakfast. After leaving the Su mansion, Su Qian took the reins from old Zhang, the gatekeeper, and rode to the inner city to call the night watchman's yamen. This horse was second uncle's mount, and now it belonged to Su Qian. Of course, in order to shut his aunt's mouth, Su Qian gave second uncle 50 taels of silver. It couldn't be helped. The watchman's yamen was in the inner city and was too far away from the Su manor. If Su Qian walked, it would be almost lunchtime before he reached the watchman's yamen. He rushed to the night watchman's yamen and stepped into Spring Breeze Hall. Li Yuchun was having tea with a silver gong. A new member under you? Yin Gong asked casually when he saw that it was a stranger. Yes. Li Yuchun nodded. What rating? Yin Luo asked. Li Yuchun did not wait for Su Qian to speak and quickly said, B-. Yin Gong was surprised and praised, not bad, not bad. The yamen needs young people with such potential. In the future, you will be the watchman's backbones. The second half of the sentence was for Su Qian. Su Qian saluted respectfully and explained, Boss, I'd like to go to the case library. He didn't know where the document library was, nor did he know the corresponding authority. If you have any problems in the future, you can directly look for the clerk. Li Yuchun said. I understand. Su Qian left Spring Breeze Hall. The leader was chatting, but as a subordinate, he shouldn't disturb him unless it was something urgent. He still had this bit of insight. Su Qian caught an official and asked him where the office was. Then, he came to a large courtyard. He handed the waist token to the black-robed official. The latter took it, confirmed it, and returned it to Su Qian. He said, "The document library is divided into 4 areas, A, B, C, D. Gong can only go to the D room to check the documents." Su Qian thought for a moment and asked, "How do I know which warehouse the information I'm looking for is in?" The black-robed clerk smiled respectfully. "Let's go to the warehouse." A, B, C, D were the 4 storehouses. D was the most basic and the largest one. This was in line with the rules of the pyramid. The more confidential a document was, the fewer it would be. Su Qian entered warehouse and came to the reception desk. "I'm looking for information on the Dao section." The clerk behind the reception desk took out a thick book and checked it for a while. He raised his head and said, "My lord, please wait a moment." He entered the inside of the document library. After a while, the black-robed official came out with a book. He took Su Qian's waist token and handed the book over. "Bring me a cup of hot tea," Su Qian said. He turned around and went to the side hall where the tables were placed, and started to read the information about Taoism. The origin of Taoism came from Taoist Venerable, whose age could no longer be verified. It was said that Taoist Venerable was an ancient legend. He turned one Qi into 3 pure ones, namely Heavenly Lord Yuanqi, Heavenly Lord Daoda, and Heavenly Lord Lingbao. Heaven, earth, and man. This was the origin of the heaven, earth, and man 3 sects of Taoism. The celestial and human sects were like fire and water. They both claimed to be orthodox Taoists and wanted to beat each other's brains out. The earth sect was the least famous, and its disciples were very low-key. They didn't fight for fame or profit. Those who didn't understand this all thought that the Dao sect only had the celestial sect and the human section. It was hard to be so idle. The battle for the orthodoxy is probably the greatest conflict these days. Su Qian added in his heart the mature lady was invincible. As he continued to read, he realized that the idle fish of the earth sect made sense. Part 5 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.